Hey guys, if you enjoy the Drunken Peasants podcast, be sure to go to audibletrial.com/Drunken Peasants to get your free audio book. They have books like The God Delusion or Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King. Also, 150,000 other titles to choose from. So be sure to check that out. It supports the show and you get a free audiobook in the process. So what the fuck do you have to lose? The Drunken Peasants podcast is satirical in nature, and while we do occasionally delve into serious issues and discussions, our primary purpose is to entertain and amuse. In other words, don't take this shit too seriously.
Coming to you live from the frigid armpit of America, this is the Drunken Peasants podcast with Ben and TJ, bringing you opinions of the news from an altered perspective.
Fuck it! Say, man, you got a joint? No, not on me, man.
I don't have facts to back this up.
It'd be a lot cooler if you did.
What the fuck are you talking about, atheist?
It's okay.
You're nothing, TJ. You're garbage.
I just want to be liked.
You're garbage.
And now, here are your hosts, Ben and TJ.
We'll do it live. We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. Fucking thing sucks.
Welcome to the Drunken Peasants podcast, where we DP the fuck out of the news. I'm Ben, and I'm here with TJ. I don't know what the fuck he's doing.
Yeah.
And we have a special guest today, Kyle Kulinski from SecularTalk.
Indeed.
Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me, guys. I get so many requests to be on your show specifically.
That's awesome.
Yeah, our show is the best.
Yeah, it is, apparently, because there's very few other requests for other shows. Everybody's just like, Drunken Peasants, Drunken Peasants, please, 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 please. So it's great that we're together.
And now you're here.
That's right.
Your fans have led you astray. Hold on.
No, I got it. You know what they say? They say that I used to do a podcast with my buddy Corin. He just recently moved because he had to move for work purposes. And everybody always said that, like, me and him fucking around doing our little podcast every Sunday reminded them of yours, of Drunken Peasants.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah, but not as good.
Obviously not as good. Damn it, I should have added that caveat.
So I've seen your videos a few times. I haven't
What do you
really...
think?
I've liked them when I've seen them. I think you're pretty funny.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I like... we kind of have tailored our show a little bit more to you tonight. We usually cover a lot of crazy people on YouTube, but I think we were doing a little bit more like of a news-heavy show tonight.
Oh, I would have spoken about anything you want.
Oh yeah.
Oh, well, we've got...
Yeah, we were gonna play a lot of like Japanese videos with no translation, and then expect you to react to them.
Well,
like,
good thing I speak fluent Japanese.
What do you think about what he said? Yeah, I got something I want to play actually that's in Japanese.
Awesome.
Yeah. So for any Japanese people out there, if Google Translate is at all accurate, that should have been pretty interesting.
That reminds me of the massage parlor where I got a hand job.
Oh no. That's an inappropriate joke. You can't tell jokes like that here. This is a PG.
No,
this is a family-friendly show, dude.
I've decided I'm allowed to say whatever I want.
You can't be saying hand job here.
I'll use code word next time.
So
just call it a foot job as a euphemism.
What's the story behind SecularTalk? How did that all come to be?
So in 2008, I was bored, and I've always been a loudmouth idiot, and I was like, let me talk on YouTube because people should hear me say shit. So I created the channel SecularTalk on YouTube, and back then I just did a few videos every now and then, and there was somebody who came along who had this website called actualpolitics.com. It no longer exists, but the guy in his spare time tried to set up this site where it was like you could rank the bias on every article you read, and
Oh, wow.
and he hired me and one other person who was a conservative talker, and also a third one, a libertarian talker as well. So he would pay me $50 and I would yap about whatever, and then he stopped doing that, and I went for like a year or 2 years, and I didn't actually do anything with political commentary, but it always existed. Then I started separately to do a blog talk radio show where I just yapped first started at like 30-minute shows, and I went to an hour. Then I worked in the car business for a little bit, and then I came out of the car business, and I said, fuck it, I'm going to try this full time. And I got lucky. It worked out. I mean, TYT offered me a contract when I had been doing it for like 3 months or so full time. And ever since I teamed up with them, their resources really helped me grow and blossom. So I owe them a lot.
That's pretty awesome. That just 3 months. That's pretty quick. You must have caught some eyes pretty early on into it.
Yeah. No, you know what it is? People who in normal human conversation, people who are like insufferable assholes like myself, we actually thrive on YouTube because you don't like.
Ben looked at me as you said that. Ben's like, that explains it.
Normal people. I mean, it's hard to get eyeballs when you're a normal person on YouTube. So you kind of, if your personality is abrasive and you're kind of a dick like myself, it just works out somehow.
Yeah, it's like magic.
So why the focus around secularism?
Well, I was pretty young when I read The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, and it blew my mind, and I just thought it was brilliant. And I had always kind of been like a secular person. I never really thought about it, but if you had asked me through most of my life of, anything religious or God-related, I would have just said, I don't know. And when I started SecularTalk, I kind of had in mind that I would do like probably half atheist stuff and half like political stuff. And that's why, and I just thought the name SecularTalk was cool. That's it.
So I mean, like, you're like me in a lot of ways that you get subjected to an inordinate amount of like stupidity on a daily basis that you have to deal with. What would you say is the stupidest thing you've ever had to deal with, or ever had to cover, or ever had to talk about? And I know that there's probably like a 600 first place tie, but what really pops in your mind when I say what's the dumbest shit you've ever had to talk about?
Well, I've gotten death threats a few times. I thought that was pretty stupid. They were one from an egg on Twitter, which like a site created specifically to threaten me, and then one recently from some Christian dude in Russia. Those were pretty stupid.
Death threats are fun.
Yeah, they are. I also get people who just totally misinterpret like arguments I make. One that comes to mind is you guys probably heard something about this. It had to do with the whole feminism versus third wave feminism thing, where I criticized a Salon article for basically they had some article like it was titled "I'm trying not to hate all men," and I did a segment where I was like, look, this is, if you take out the word man and put in any other group, everybody would flip out and say, you can't do that. That's obviously
why I'm
ridiculous.
Trying not to hate niggers.
Exactly.
It's like,
he's trying not to hate them. What's the problem?
Yeah.
He said they're trying not to.
He said he's trying not to, guys. He's not racist.
So I criticized, and then people who would typically honestly be on the side of me and the show started coming after me. People who you would describe as like third wave feminists, and so I did a response video where I was like, "Look, bitch, you can't question my."
Ooh, you said bitch. Now that's
feminism.
More patriarchy right there.
When you look through my my video archive, the men's rights people hate me. I've done videos like, I forget what the number is, but like anywhere between 70 to 90% of the videos I've done have actually been pro various feminist arguments. And the times I've criticized, I just thought it was totally merited because the feminism had gotten too radical to the point.
Hey, hold on. Don't you understand that any criticism of feminism is never merited? No matter how radical the feminist may be, no matter how illogical the position, if you're a man, you are not allowed to criticize feminism ever, even if it's like, here's an essay on why all men should be castrated. Well, I disagree with that. You're a misogynist.
Yeah, it's quite sad to know that, you know, I do believe that there's less tribalism on the left compared to the right, but there certainly is still tribalism on the left, for sure. And that's a good example of it right there.
So where did you fall on the whole Gamergate issue?
Gamergate, I did, I think, 2 segments overall on Gamergate. And first of all, before I continue, let me just add the caveat that it is fucking confusing. I was getting tweets for like 3 weeks straight, like, why aren't you covering Gamergate? I don't understand why you're not covering Gamergate. This is the biggest story since fucking the Civil War. I don't understand why you're not covering it. And so when I finally covered it, you know, I just very broadly and very vaguely said, I didn't want to dive into all the details because I could have ended up speaking about it for 30 minutes, but I did a fairly short segment where I said, look, I mean, to lump in all gamers as sexist and, you know, losers who are doing nothing with their lives, I think that's the same kind of generalization and bigotry that people on the left normally oppose. So to have people who you would group in with the left wing now all of a sudden, you know, fine with generalizing about video game players, it's a little bit absurd. So I kind of sided more with the video game people.
Well, speaking of like flaws of the left, you know, I'm like you in that I mean, I think I don't really know. I'm, like I said, I'm not like super familiar with their content, but I've seen a good amount of it. But I think that, you know, I'm pretty much a liberal. I'm a liberal on pretty much everything. I'm not sure if I'm a progressive on everything, but you know, I do tend to lean that way. So I mean, it kind of boggles my mind when I see things like the liberals being the ones who are, by and large, the anti-vax crowd, you know?
Yeah,
like,
that really gets under my skin, man. I've done many segments on that where, and look, here's the thing about that's really interesting is that the sentiment from which that flows is a sentiment that's understandable because it's a fear of, hey, these big pharmaceutical companies have bought the government and, you know, they've made it so that there's no efficient regulation of them and they can get away with, you know, a bunch of shit that they shouldn't be allowed to get away with. But the problem is that initial sentiment, that initial thought, which is a legitimate concern, it then spreads out to the idea that therefore anything and everything that a pharmaceutical company has to do with is bullshit. And that's obviously not true because, I mean, think about it. When you get in a car accident and you snap your femur, you're going to go to the hospital, they're going to put you on a morphine drip, and you're going to feel fucking good because the morphine is pharmaceutical grade and it works.
Yeah.
You know, the same thing with the antiviral drugs if you need them, or antibiotics when you need them, as long as you don't have MRSA and it's, you know, beyond help. But just because the pharmaceutical companies are fucked up in many ways that we can point to, and just because there's a problem with the profit motive, specifically in the realm of healthcare, does not mean that therefore every argument against pharmaceutical companies makes sense. And you can't lump in vaccines with shit like alternative medicine, which we know is bullshit.
I've seen people from both sides of the spectrum that were anti-vaxxers. Like we played a Glenn Beck video 2 days ago.
Right.
Where he was,
sure.
Yeah.
There's definitely it's not along political lines, but there are it's a lot of left-leaning people, especially in like the California, like West Coast kind of scene,
That's right.
where they have a very like a naturalist fallacy, where anything that's natural is good, anything that's man-made is bad.
Dude,
and
you hit the nail on the head right there. That's another issue that I've tried to speak about that quite a bit. The idea that natural equals good. Well, hello, feces is natural, anthrax is natural, Lysol is not natural. Which one of those things would you like to use to clean your desk? I mean, it's such an obvious fallacy, but it's one of those things that's just like it evokes a visceral response from some progressives where they're like, yes, natural's good, organic's good.
Yeah, you know, it's a very strange mentality. And you know, the weird thing to me is that, you know, so many of these left-leaning people who I think are right on most issues, they're the first to call the conservatives on, oh, you know, when they don't believe in evolution, it's like, you guys don't listen to what science says. When they don't accept climate change, it's like, well, you guys need to listen to what the scientists say. But then when it comes to vaccines, it's a lot of people on the left who are basically covering their ears and not listening to what the science says.
That's right. Are you ready? Let me one up that real quick.
It's just very selective, though.
He's going to one up you.
One up it. One up it. Yeah.
GMOs.
Yeah.
GMOs is another one where...
Yeah, the left is like batshit.
That's right. I did this really long segment on my show where, first of all, Neil deGrasse Tyson made this like offhand comment when he was asked by somebody, hey, what do you think of GMOs? And he went on this, he made this statement like, well, everything we eat is genetically modified. Like, whether or not you acknowledge that or know that is irrelevant because it is genetically modified. So that's the point he made. And then what I did is I went through what the scientific consensus is. Like, people think there's not a scientific consensus on GMOs. That's not true. There absolutely is a scientific consensus. And I laid it out, and I don't even know how many fucking studies I went through. It must have been 7 or 8 different ones with different medical associations and world governments that say, yes, there's no evidence that it leads to negative consequences, yada, yada. And still, for whatever reason, I get tweets every once in a while who, yeah, you're wrong about GMOs, bro. I'm like, did you not hear when I was referencing studies? It wasn't just me. Like, I'm not making it up. I'm the middleman for the shit that I read that's the study. So you're not disagreeing with me. You're disagreeing with the medical associations, and you're disagreeing with the world governments and all the institutes I laid out for you, the various institutes. And people refuse to acknowledge it. There was a good article called The Tale of Two Scientific Consensus, if that's how you pronounce it. Consensus?
Yeah. Consensus is.
Consensi.
And it basically demonstrated how liberals obviously always scream about it when it comes to evolution and climate change, but then this other area where there is a scientific consensus on GMOs, they flip it. And it needs more study. Well, that's what the fucking conservatives say about climate change.
Right, exactly.
It's not true.
It's just funny to see that, regardless of what side of the political spectrum people are on, they're always willing to put their own personal beliefs above the evidence, above the science. And that's okay. If you want to do that, that's fine. But you have to explicitly say that. You have to say, this is my belief. I have no evidence for it. It's basically just my personal faith.
I don't have facts to back this up.
Right. I just believe this. I have no reason to believe it. It's just something I want to believe, therefore I do. And that's about as much weight as it should carry.
I will add, though, that I don't think it's equal. I don't think that you have equal science denial on both sides. I think that by and large, the overwhelming majority of the science denial is on the right. And actually, specifically, those issues we brought up, maybe the only examples on the left. And in other areas, the left is pretty good.
Sure. I agree with that. I feel like, the left needs to be taken to task a little bit more on this shit because...
I agree.
I mean, there's plenty of people that are pointing out when Pat Robertson says some stupid shit. There's not enough people pointing out when Bill Maher says some stupid shit. And usually when there is, it's someone who's a conservative fuckwit who doesn't even know what's what, so...
Yeah, that's the worst, man. If you notice, the last episode of Real Time... there was a point where Bill Nye brought up vaccines to Maher, and Maher just moved on to the next topic. And I was like, fuck, I really wish that Nye was able to hammer him on that, because Nye was going to be like, Bill, you're just wrong. He always goes into this tap dance when you call him out. He goes, I'm not anti-vax, but... And then he says some stupid shit.
It's almost like when when someone says, what if God guided evolution? It's like,
That's right. Yeah, it's like, this isn't a middle ground. You're not finding a middle ground.
Ooh, the middle. I found the middle ground between truth and lies, everybody. It's like, no, that's still a lie, actually.
It's a great way to put it.
It's not the middle ground. It's the illusion of a middle ground.
That's right.
All right, so let's play our game. Here's a game that we play. We just recently started doing it. It's a thing that we do every episode. It's called. Hold on, I'll play the intro. There you go. So, is this person a troll or not a troll? I didn't set up a poll this time.
It's okay.
Yeah.
The polls were pointless anyway.
Yep. All right, so
just yell it out when you feel like you comfortably know it.
Okay.
Whether
Yeah.
he's a,
And in
you
this-
either say troll or not a troll.
And in this case, in the comments section, you can put troll or not a troll for everyone that's watching.
or you can tweet it to us. I don't know.
Shocking scenes in North Brisbane, Australia today. Cyclone Marsha has swept through, leaving rural towns dealing with heavy rain and floods. Locals believing God has sent the cyclone in response to the new Jurassic Park dinosaur movie, Jurassic World.
To happen, you got all these theories, the evolution, dinosaurs just floating around, the new Jurassic Park movie coming out. It's only a matter of time before God actually answered us back, and this is what happens.
The online anti-dinosaur movement, Christians Against...
How about you, TJ? Do you think troll? Or you're not sure yet?
I'm not sure just yet.
Okay, I'll play a little bit more.
Against Dinosaurs made early warning of these kinds of events. The locals here are beginning to take notice.
I think after seeing God's wrath firsthand and seeing what's happened, it's definitely warned me off of seeing the Jurassic Park movie. I was going to see it, but now I'll definitely be boycotting it.
I'm going to go with
I can
troll.
only hope
Okay, that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, he's acting.
Okay. Yeah, I think they might have something to do with the Christians Against Dinosaurs thing.
Christians against
Have you seen-
dinosaurs.
Yeah, have you seen those?
I've heard about it. I didn't read any articles on it though. Is this guy might be serious?
There's a good possibility.
I don't know.
Never. I would never say. There's nothing that could be said that's so dumb that I think there's no way someone really believes that, because I've met too many crazy, stupid people.
Yeah.
But in this case, I don't know. I just get the vibe of this not being legit.
Yeah, he looks like he's acting a little bit. Like he's.
Yeah.
Doesn't look
And
like a
it's-
genuine thought that he's letting out there.
The main thing that for me is that it's not a big enough disaster for them to even be attributing it to God.
Ah, that's a good thought, man. That's a great point. It's just
You know-
like a little bit of water. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's like, I don't feel like they'd be really reaching for straws then. I'd imagine you got to wait for like a big tsunami where thousands of people die. Then you go like, oh, this is God's judgment. This is God punishing us.
Yeah, remember Mike Huckabee after Sandy Hook? He said it was because they prayer out of school.
Yeah, they took prayer out of school, and God was like, I always wondered if the shootings happened because they took prayer out of school, then why are shootings still able to happen in churches? Because I've read there have been at least a few church shootings that I can think of. Maybe they're just the wrong religions. Also, what about the little boys in the Catholic Church? God wasn't really protecting them, was he? Strange.
God, that was holy dick. God wanted them to get the holy dick.
Yeah, God was like, I want this. This is little boys getting raped by priests. Yeah, that's part of my agenda. Didn't you read the Bible?
Oh, by the way, I watched a hangout recently that G-Man was in, and they asked him, like, what did you mean when you said you don't believe in starving children? He was like, I never said that. What I meant to say is that starving Christian children don't exist.
Oh, that's still wrong.
Is this crazy Christian guy that we have on our show sometimes?
That's like incomprehensibly stupid.
I know. Well, he's also he says slavery is okay if the Bible says it's okay, and he's an African American.
Oh, good googly moogly.
Yeah.
It's a sad state of affairs. We've had him on the show quite a few times. He's an interesting fellow to chat with.
Yeah.
It's so amazing how like otherwise normal humans can take their ideology and their belief system and just superimpose it over the facts of reality. So going back to that Mike Huckabee thing, it's like, I don't doubt that he really believes that was one of the reasons why the shooting happened. I think that he's so uber Christian and up his own ass that he's like, he probably really thinks that oh yeah, the shooting happened because the kids weren't praying. And it's just amazing to me that like, they can't even do the minimal level of objectivity. They can't even try to achieve a state of like, let me see what's actually happening here. They can't break free from their own ridiculous beliefs.
Maybe if the kids were praying to Zeus, they'd be safe.
Yeah,
you never know.
That's another thing that's so stunning to me. I think I make this point too many times on my show where everybody's like, shut the fuck up, we get it already. But it's like, obviously, if Mike Huckabee was born in fucking ancient Rome, he'd believe in the Roman gods. If he was born in a Buddhist society. He would
no.
believe in
Hey,
Buddhism,
listen. Bullshit. No matter what time or place you put Mike Huckabee in, he is a devoted Christian.
Exactly, right?
You could send him back to 10,000 BC, and he'd be trying to convert mammoths.
Convert mammoths.
I hear they're already Protestant. It's all right, man.
Protestant mammoths.
That'd be a good band name.
All right.
I like that.
Let's play this video. This is some news video out of Las Vegas.
Viva Las Vegas!
Remove your keys from the ignition and put them on the roof now.
This was the beginning of a daylight nightmare for collector car owners Robin and Beverly Bruins.
I can tell that they're criminals just by looking at them.
They look like pure scum.
Yep.
Pure fucking scum.
Yeah, this is a story about the police just getting it wrong time after time, and then innocent people having to spend the day in jail because of it.
Washington State.
When I turned and looked back and saw 3 gun barrels pointed at me, it obviously hit me like, whoa, what is going on here?
Go ahead and lift your shirt up. No, lift the top of your collar.
Robin Bruin says multiple officers were shouting commands he found conflicting or confusing.
Okay, turn around for me. Turn around for me. Stop. Turn around.
And I looked at him and said, are you talking to me?
Yes, you. Turn around.
You know,
they're like, turn around. No, turn around again.
He's like, I'm white, guys. I'm an old white dude. You guys are supposed to harass young minorities, aren't you? I'm an old white guy.
Bernie Madoff. They thought he was Bernie Madoff.
Fuck you, Bernie. Fucked up my 401k.
He is driving a nice old car. Well, Bernie is doing hard time, but
so they'd have you believe.
Yeah.
I love the part where they tell him, like, lift your shirt up, and he starts reaching down to pull off his shirt like any human being would, and they're like, no! You gotta lift by the collar. It's like, why didn't you just say that to begin with?
Yeah,
then?
lift your shirt by the collar.
Yeah, like, make that part of the initial instruction.
Fuck you for not being able to read my mind.
There was a point where it looked like he was going to start doing the hokey pokey with all the commands that they were yelling at.
Put your left foot in, you take your left foot out.
What's going on?
Okay, get underneath.
Do you think this car is stolen or something? And he said, exactly right. And the car is going back to its rightful owner.
Passenger, limit your hand.
We were treated like we were Bonnie and Clyde.
Beverly Bruins was also removed from the car at gunpoint. She had a broken leg at the time.
So I went to reach for my crutches in the back seat, and then they yelled at me.
Put your hands up in the air. Leave it alone. Okay.
A woman trooper takes Beverly into custody and checks her background.
And asked me if
That's not all she checked.
Well, it's funny, she's got a crutch, and they're all like, put your hands up.
Beat her with her crutch.
What was their fucking evidence? What was their evidence to begin with?
Oh, they'll show that in a second. It's totally ridiculous.
Say goodbye to my husband. And I said, goodbye to my husband? Where's my husband going? And she said, well, he's going to jail.
Going to jail, Bill, or Bob, or whatever the fuck your
C-Rob,
name is.
He's in the back seat, no shirt on, hands behind his back, and tears are running down his face.
So wait a minute. If they thought that they both stole this car, why is only he getting arrested?
Because he's the one driving it, I guess. I don't know how
I'm pretty sure they usually arrest the passengers, too, in a stolen car, but I guess old woman with crutches was just still one.
Yeah, no evidence yet. And it's funny. It's a few different errors on the part of a few different people that caused this to happen.
Well, the thing about it is that American police are kind of like creationists. They don't need evidence.
Yeah, they just act. They just do shit, and then afterwards they rationalize.
Robin is ultimately taken to the Clark County Detention Center, where he spends most of the night in a holding cell with 24 new acquaintances.
I don't even think I've ever stood next to a police car, let alone been inside one.
While Robin was in jail, Beverly took her crutches and luggage to a hotel, where she was ultimately able to sort things out. It turns out the car was stopped by the trooper because it had a historical license plate that did not show up in a computer check. Restored plates issued in the year the classic car was made are legal in Washington. The registration, which the Bruins provided the trooper, shows the historical plate in a box called equipment number, but the actual plate number is in another box. The trooper did run this number, but he didn't include the plus sign, so it came back to the wrong vehicle. That's error number 1.
218.
Error number 2 came when the trooper radioed the correct VIN number of the car into dispatch, but the dispatcher entered the wrong number into the computer, and the erroneous number came back to...
When I had you to myself, I didn't want you around. Those pretty faces always made you stand out in the crowd. Oh, darling, I was blind to let you go, baby. But now, since I've seen you in his arms, I want you back. Yes, I do now.
Get back to the brands and styles you want and get an extra 20% off. Plus, enter Macy's All School Acapella Challenge.
I want you back.
Entered the wrong number into the computer, and the erroneous number came back to a stolen car similar to the Bruins. The Bruins don't understand why officers didn't act on what appeared to be their own belief that the Bruins might be innocent victims.
Yeah.
So basically the police are stupid and everyone should be frightened.
When I see shit like this, I feel like I want to become an anarchist. Because it's like how they're so wrong.
We had a guest last week that you could join.
We
up
had
with.
Adam Kokesh on.
Oh, goodness gracious. That's all right. I'll pass.
You could join him, man.
No, I'm all right.
He's got the answers, dude.
I think I covered him once on my show for something. I don't remember what it was, though. Wasn't it he got, like, arrested carrying a weapon, like, outside the White House or some shit?
Yeah.
Yeah, smart guy.
Yeah. His thing to TJ that he kept saying was, "Well, TJ, you'll see the light someday." He sounded religious.
Religious, yeah, that's a religious thing.
Which is funny because he was trying to say like the state is the last big religion, but the way he was talking was like he was trying to convert us to his religion.
Oh God, it's you know who else is like that? Stefan Molyneux.
Oh God, we call him Stephanie Manure here.
Yeah, I mean it's so funny that he considers himself a philosopher. Like, you're not a philosopher. You're a guy who does anarcho-capitalist talking points that we're all familiar with. It's not like you have this new thing that you came up with, but you mask it in this veil of, I'm so intellectual.
Hey,
nonsense.
The reason we call him Stephanie is because we actually covered an incident that happened, I don't know, a number of months ago. He, I don't know if you saw this, but he posted on one of his own videos on his own account, but it was clear that he meant to post it under a sock account as a woman, because he was saying things like, as a woman, I really admire your take on this.
As an attractive woman.
Yeah, he said, as an attractive woman, I admire your take on this issue, Stefan.
Are you serious?
Yes, I'm serious.
Oh my God, that's so sad. Oh, that's the saddest thing I've ever heard in my life, man. What is he doing?
Yeah.
You sounded like Shaggy just now.
Check this out. Okay, here's a like a 30-second clip of something John Boehner. Yeah, did recently. He had a strange reaction to a question from a reporter at a press conference.
The wink, I think, right?
With respect, Mr. Speaker, that your answers about what you're going to do are the same as yesterday. Can we Mr. McConnell has said exactly what he's going to do. You're going to get. It's going to be a clean VHS funding bill.
What
the fuck? Put it on the floor. Are you going to kill it? Are you going to let him vote on it? Have you even had this discussion?
When we make decisions, I'll let you know.
Okay.
All right, I have one word. Ready?
So John Boehner has come out.
Alcohol.
Yes. Oh yeah. That dude 100%. Is always tank. Yes.
Yeah, the dude's a well-known alcoholic, man. Just all day long, drinking all day.
He could be like the stupid Hitchens. He could just walk around with like some Johnny Walker Black Label in his hand at all times and just chain smoke cigarettes and give like disgruntled answers to questions.
The other.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say the other people there are like, "What was that?" And he's like, "What? It was a kiss."
I was just. He's gonna. I feel like he's gonna be tapping his foot in an airport restroom soon, though.
Yeah, possibly. It's actually really sad how stupid John Boehner is. Like if you look at the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party, it's not
actually,
an accident that
it's
like
pronounced
the Republicans, Boehner. That's right,
Yeah.
John Boehner. It's not an accident that the Republicans are like always like really weird, but also when it comes to arguing about politics, they're always like really abrasive and really strong. Whereas when you look at the Democrats who rise to the top of the ranks, it's always people like Harry Reid, who's like, I'd like to disagree with you maybe a little bit, if that's okay. And the reason why that is because the big money funds the strong Republicans and they fund the weak Democrats because, of course, they agree with the Republicans, so they want the Republicans to win. So that's why you see the people who rise to the top of each party usually stronger Republicans and weaker Democrats, because that's what the corporations want, essentially.
You know, it kind of reminds me of I've actually been able to pick who's going to get the nomination and who's going to win the presidency with an astonishing accuracy rate. Even when conventional wisdom is going another way, I'm usually able to kind of read the writing on the wall on just like a gut feeling. And the only time I can think of that I was ever wrong was I was sure back, I think it was in the 2000 election when they were having the primaries for that, Howard Dean was one of the Democratic candidates, and I was for sure that he was going to win because I just got a sense of charisma from him, and he also was very forceful for a Democrat. And, you know, I'm not saying that I necessarily love the guy or hate the guy, but he was saying things that were a little bit more ballsy than the Democrats were at that time.
Right.
It might have been the 2004. I think it was the 2004 campaign.
Yes.
But he was... it was the strangest thing, because I don't know if you guys remember the exact nature of his downfall.
Oh, because he was like, yeah!
But he was like, because he said, woo! He basically did a Ric Flair where he's like, woo!
Yeah, yep.
And the news media just decided, like, this is the most awkward, embarrassing thing that anyone has ever done, and we must play it 20,000 times a day forever until his candidacy is destroyed.
And that's what happened.
And I'm like, how did you destroy someone's entire campaign just by playing him saying woo over and over again?
Yeah.
It's the strangest thing. Like, you could do that to anybody. Like, you could just find, like, one awkward moment of Obama's or Bush's, and let's just play that all day, every day.
One awkward moment of Bush.
I know, that's what I'm saying, though. Bush had all this variety of awkward moments, but if you just taken one and just, like, we're just going to play this all day, every day, on every news station, you could have destroyed him. You could destroy anyone doing that.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on a key point here. I think what you're describing is exactly why you have so many good new media outlets now that do news and politics that are successful. I don't think I could be as successful as I am, TYT can, as they are, if it wasn't for the media sucking so much that they really do cover that shit day in and day out as if it matters. I mean, people really want to hear some real shit. They really want to hear people talk about things that matter, like the healthcare system and the economic system, and, hey, how are we going to work this out? Hey, how are we going to make things better for people? But what you have is the media doing exactly what you're talking about. They're like, Howard Dean made a noise. Let's talk about that for 3 weeks straight.
Yeah, but the thing is like, they intend... I mean, it's so obvious that it was an intentional thing on the media's part that they got together and said, let's just destroy this guy because we want this other candidate.
I think he had just won a big primary or something like that.
He was leading. Yeah, he was leading in the polls.
He was leading in the polls, but he just lost. He'd had an unexpected loss in Iowa or whatever, or some other state, and that's why he was giving that speech. And they framed it like, look how desperate he is. He's trying to make it seem like he's still happy even though he lost that state.
He's on stage in front of a bunch of people cheering for him. It's like, you're going to get passionate, you know. I remember that because at the time, like, I used to turn on Rush or Hannity for fun every now and then, and they played that like 24 hours a day.
Woo!
Yeah.
Woo!
All the time.
Woo!
It's so funny. Like, I would never in a million years consider, like, it's like if I'm trying to pick who I want to be president or who I want to be a senator or something, the idea that I would like sit down and go, okay, how are they on this issue? Okay, check. How are they on the issue of abortion? Check. How are they on the issue of taxes? Check. Oh, how are they with random noises made during random speeches? Like, that never would come into factoring if I would vote for them or not, but that shows you how vacuous the media is, that they're like, no, this is what we're going to talk about. This is so important. No, it's not. I mean, you just made it important.
It also shows how vacuous some of the populace are, because
Yeah.
A lot of people just went along with that, like, yeah, that really is a big deal.
Well, when Al Gore was running for president, the thing was Al Gore said he invented the internet. Al Gore said he invented the internet.
Al Gore said he invented the internet.
Yeah, they said it like 100 times. It's like, that's not what he said.
Yeah, he said, I voted for the funding, which eventually led to the creation of the technology that made the internet.
Al Gore says he invented the internet, guys.
You heard it here first. Kyle Kulinski just said that Al Gore was right and that he did invent the internet. We all heard it.
And now they'll run with that. I actually got caught in one of these things also. So I did a segment where it was based like O'Reilly said some shit, and it allowed me to have like a hook into a bigger story about what the Bible really says on abortion. And so when you actually go into the Bible, like there's a few websites that have all this information, they quote the different passages and stuff. The Bible's actually not anti-abortion.
No.
The Bible's actually pro-abortion. And I cited like 4 or 5 different areas where it's like really clear. Like there's one example where if your wife cheats on you, she's supposed to drink what they call bitter water in the Bible. That's like a code word for like poison. And if she drinks it and she miscarries, aka has an abortion, then yeah, the baby was from the person that she cheated with. But if she drinks it and she still carries the baby to term, then it's your baby and it's all good. So literally the Bible argues, hey, if your wife cheats on you, have an abortion. And then there's also another part of the Bible where in Samaria, God goes through, which I think is current day Palestine, God goes through and rips out the babies from the stomachs of all the women. So that's God literally performing abortions. So on my show, I went through all these different passages, and then I said, this is the part where God performs abortions. And so what did all these conservative websites do? Took me out of context, just said, quote, lib radio host, God performs abortions, and then they wrote articles about it. But actually, what's hilarious is first of all, if you watch the segment, it's clear that I'm literally quoting passages, so I'm not making anything up. It's right there. But also, some of the articles, like the less intelligent right-wing sites, like there's one that's a site specifically about abortion, like Life News or some shit, or something Christian something, whatever. They wrote an article where they literally quote me back the entire article, and they don't even provide a counter-argument. They just say, first, he goes to this part of the Bible, and they put me in quotes. Then to this part, and they put me in quotes. And the whole tone of the article is like, what an idiot. He says that the Bible is pro-abortion. But meanwhile, they're proving my point in the article. So
They interpret it differently.
Kyle, why do you hate God? What did he ever do to you? Come on, why do you hate God?
What happened to you? What happened to you as a kid that made you hate God?
He touched me.
He's supposed to touch you. He's God.
Actually, that made me like him when he touched me.
All right, so next video.
But then he stopped touching you, so you feel bitter.
Next video, we have Ann Coulter, everyone's favorite.
Yay, Ann Coulter! Woo!
She's talking about why. She's saying, why can't we question the patriotism of liberals? Is what she's going to say.
She does that all the time.
Yeah.
Rudy Giuliani was speaking for Scott Walker. He was at a Republican dinner in Wisconsin. And you know what? Here, put his comments up full screen. What he said, I know this is horrible. I don't want to say this, but, you know, he doesn't have the same love of country. So we've gone through that. Do you think the mayor should have been doing that, questioning the president's love of country?
Yeah, I don't see what the problem with it is.
It's Ann Coulter. You know the answer you're going to get. You might as well just ask her, all right, Ann, go ahead and defend Giuliani. We know that's what you're here to do.
So true.
Liberals are constantly questioning, conservatives' position on race, i.e. we're constantly being called racist. This idea that, oh no, in this one case we can't look at their motives. And these red-faced denials, no, we love our country. We just look like people who don't. We're just naive and inept. Well, okay, maybe you can start a group of Democrats who are naive and inept.
I'm already just like, whatever.
I know. She's a troll. We should have her on Troll or Not a Troll.
Troll or Not a Troll.
First of all, I love that she's setting it up as like, well, you guys do this, so why can't I do that? But she brings up things that are not related at all. She's like, well, you guys sometimes question whether or not some Republicans are racist. so why can't we call Obama unpatriotic? It's like, wait, but there are some Republicans that are racist, and no, Obama isn't unpatriotic. So
Man,
you're wrong.
circles are round, so why can't triangles be round? Come on. It's only fair, guys.
Now, and you know what I love about this whole Giuliani thing? It really shows you how intellectually bankrupt they are, because it's really not that difficult to say, hey, look, here's where I disagree with you on policy. Hey, look at what you're doing with ISIS. I'd rather you do X, Y, and Z as opposed to A, B, and C. But they can't do that because they don't actually have anything substantive to say. They can't say, hey, I want you to do more, airstrikes against ISIS, because he's already doing airstrikes against ISIS. When you ask them about ground troops, they're like, actually, yeah, I don't want ground troops. Okay, well, he hasn't put ground troops in there either. So on the issues themselves, they actually kind of agree with him. So since they can't attack him on the issues, they have to pivot to emotional garbage and bullshit like that, where they're like, well, I just don't think he loves America. I think he doesn't like the country.
But like the thing about it too is like there's no way to prove one way or the other Obama's personal feelings about America. I would assume the fact that he's the fucking president probably means that he does like America.
Right.
So, I mean, the thing is, like, how are we supposed to know that? And also, who even gives a fuck?
I would have said the same thing about George Bush. I hated George Bush as a president, but I'm pretty sure he liked America, just his idea.
But, I mean, like, even regardless of how these guys feel about America, I mean, like, isn't it really the policies that matter, not their personal feelings?
That's right. And that, I think, the nail on the head is the idea that, look, I hated George W. Bush more than anybody. When I spoke about George W. Bush, like you just said, I go, here's why I disagree with him. Let me give you the exact reasons why I disagree with him. And by the way, I can even point to specific issues where he was literally acting un-American, as in he disagreed with things in the Constitution that are by definition American, like, NSA spying, which destroyed privacy in this country, Guantanamo Bay, which obviously wildly contradicts the idea that you have a protection from cruel and unusual punishment. So I can even.
That's only for American citizens, not them terrorists.
Yeah, that's right, man. You don't. You told them. So I could point to specific issues where I'm like, look, on these specific issues, I think he's un-American in that sense. But overall, does he love America? Yes, George. Every president, I think, loved America. To say that they don't is, it's absurd. It's obvious that the default position should be that for any president, whether I like them or don't like them, that overall they love the country. I might disagree with them on every issue, but that just means they disagree with me. It doesn't mean that they wake up in the morning and say, like a Manchurian candidate, how can I bring this country down? I need to do it now.
Well, it's kind of like,
I'm pretty sure Obama does do that.
If you were, against the war in Iraq when it was in full swing, then you hated the troops or you didn't support the troops. You would have gotten that a lot.
Book, man.
Or you hated freedom.
The oldest trick in the book is tell people that they're unpatriotic if they don't support the troops in a war where you disagree with the war itself. And obviously the counter argument is the way to actually support the troops is to not send them to wars that it's not absolutely necessary to fight. If I was in the military, I would want you to support me by getting me out of a place where it's hostile and I shouldn't be there.
But let's be honest here. A lot of people join the military because they want to go kill people.
Unfortunately, I think that's true. That there is a lot.
That's true, and the GI Bill. They go to,
Also,
lower class high schools and start recruiting 7 and 18-year-olds into the military right away.
I can just tell you, I'm from Louisiana. I know a lot of people who have joined the military, and their main reason for doing it was either the practical benefits, like I'm going to get my college and shit paid for, and that's all well and good. It's totally understandable. But there was also a lot of guys like, that they wanted the glory of going to a war and fighting, some enemy like their granddaddy did or some shit.
I think it's a mix. I think you guys are both right. I think it's a mix of both things. That first of all, it's a case-by-case basis, so you have to look at each individual to figure out what it was for each individual.
Sure.
But also, like as a general rule, I think you're both right, that it oftentimes is probably a mix of beliefs. It's probably a little bit of poverty and having no opportunities, but also mixed in with sometimes some people are like, fuck it, I want to go balls to the wall and start shooting shit.
And I'm sure there's a few Captain Americas out there that actually believe in the bullshit.
Yeah, and that's the part that kills me the most, because it's heartbreaking to see that, like, a lot of people have bought into the absolute garbage that's, been fed to us for so long about specifically the war on terror. It drives me crazy because it's just wasting perfectly good human lives.
Yeah, and it's been going on for quite some time now. So
yeah, it's Orwellian, man. It never stops, and now they define
but
that
look,
as peace.
On the positive side, though, you got to look at the upside. Silver lining in every cloud. The military-industrial complex is still making a lot of money.
They're booming. Business is booming.
Booming business.
Yeah.
And that they're job creators, and what they make, it trickles down. A rising tide lifts all ships, etc.
Think about how, if we woke up tomorrow, let's say we woke up tomorrow and the military had to stop working for a year in every way. That's half the fucking economy is gonzo. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That we have about half the economy is just military. Did you know the U.S. military is the #1 employer, or U.S. Army, whatever the broader one is the #1 employer in the world? Isn't that crazy? Bigger than Walmart, bigger than every big company you would ever think of.
Yeah, and I mean, in many ways, the military is it has like a social structure, like it's publicly funded. It has like elements of socialism to it.
It's purely socialist. It's all tax dollars funded, yeah.
Right. So it's strange that people who are pro-military think that anything else that's socialist is evil.
Yeah, people who are there's that hypocrisy is all over the place, man. People who are, I'm pro-police, man. I'm pro the police officers, but I hate socialism. Well, that's fucking pure socialism too, dipshit. People don't know. They don't understand that.
I don't think, the fact that so many people, that socialism is just thrown around so cavalierly in America. I don't really think people have a very strong grasp of what socialism even means.
Yeah, a lot of them think it's the same thing as communism.
I think it just means, for most of these conservatives, especially the rural folks.
Yeah.
They kind of feel like socialism is just a euphemism for anything I don't like.
That's a great point. They would never hear out an argument as to why it's not the worst thing. They're immediately shut down because they think that by definition it's bad, even though ironically they couldn't give you the definition if you asked them for it.
All right, so we're gonna move, or let's listen to a little more of Ann Coulter.
Sure.
I mean, Obama, how else do you explain? He threw away our victory in Iraq for no reason whatsoever. He sends more troops to Afghanistan.
Wow.
Do you want to address that?
Tales from an alternate reality. Tales from an alternate reality.
Let me tell you guys something. I think there's one fact I always bring up on my show because I think it really highlights just how fucking crazy the world is that we live in. It feels like a simulation when you hear shit like this. So when they did the surge in Iraq, you remember the surge in the mid 2000s? Yeah. This is what we got to do. It'll fix everything.
Yeah.
So when that happened, when they did that, violence increased and there were more attacks and there were more deaths and there were more problems. And they argued, when that happened, that's okay because that proves that the surge is working because it shows that the insurgency is, quote, in its last throes. And then what would happen is the next month the violence would go down a little bit and they go, see, the surge worked. But then the next month it would go up again and they go, see, the surge is working. It proves that the insurgency is in its last throes. So they set up a non-falsifiable claim that no matter what the fuck happened, no matter what, by definition, it's working. The Iraq war is working. So when you look at something like that, it drives you fucking crazy because you feel like you're in the Twilight Zone. You're screaming about, this is the bad policy, the wrong thing to do, people are dying, this isn't helping anything. But meanwhile, the media, would report it as, like it was nothing because the administration would make that argument and they would repeat it ad nauseum.
Yeah, well, and the thing is that, and that's when the media was still even covering the war, because for the last 5 or so years of that war, you wouldn't even know it was happening if you watched the mainstream news.
Amazing. Could you imagine that during World War II? It's inconceivable that during World War II the country would
Are we still fighting Hitler? Huh? What?
Yeah, it's inconceivable they would forget. But with the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, I bet you there are people right now, 17-year-olds right now, where you go talk to them, they're like, "What do you mean? I don't. We're still there. I don't get it."
It's pretty funny.
I suppose you could just criticize his policy, but if liberals are going to go around constantly questioning conservatives' motives on other issues, why shouldn't we question their motives on patriotism?
All right, I want to put this up because he wrote this as a response in the Wall Street Journal. He said, "My blunt language suggesting that the president doesn't love America, notwithstanding, I didn't intend to question the president's motives or the content of his heart. My intended focus really was the effect of his words and his actions that have on the morale of this country and how that affects."
I can't believe Giuliani.
That's like if you call Obama an ugly motherfucker and then say afterwards, I wasn't attempting to criticize his appearance.
If Giuliani wouldn't have happened to have been the mayor of New York when 9/11 happened, do you think anyone would still give a shit what he says?
No, I don't. Yeah.
It made him actually a semi-viable presidential candidate at one point, too.
He ran arguably the worst presidential campaign in the history of the United States of America. He was leading in every poll going into the primary, and then like 3 weeks into the primary, he was done. He was out of it because he didn't want to campaign anywhere. He had this strategy where he's like, "No, I'm not going to Iowa. I'm tired. I don't want to go there."
Iowa's passe.
He definitely wasn't going to win New York, and that's like, so.
Yeah, when you lose your home state.
He looks like Nosferatu to me.
Yes.
I don't think that was the actual name of the vampire in Nosferatu, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, he looks like
he has that appearance.
He also said at one point, not here, but he said at one point, "I'm not questioning Obama's patriotism. I'm questioning his love of country."
That's right.
That says everything you need to know about Rudy Giuliani right there. That's how stupid he is.
Why doesn't he just tattoo stupid to his forehead to save time,
He probably should.
May damage his performance.
He's got plenty of forehead to do it on.
Jim Acosta, he believes what he said. He doesn't regret what he said. He is explaining he didn't really apologize. Do you don't think that these comments were somehow tinged by race at all?
Oh, now you're doing it.
No, I'm asking you a question. I'm asking you.
That's
I'm not saying that it is. I'm asking you because you mentioned it. You mentioned
but
race.
It does get thrown. No, okay, but it does get thrown at conservatives an awful lot. And why isn't that the exact
how the
parallel?
fuck could you not throw it at conservatives an awful lot? They inexplicably hate a president that basically, if you actually look at his policies, has basically been a George Bush clone, except for on like a few social issues. But they act like he's the worst, most dictatorial, communist, socialist, fascist, Nazi ever to exist. And the only thing you can really point to as a difference is he's black and he has a D next to his name. Now maybe the D next to his name accounts for some of that.
So I think that when you look at this, you have to compare it to something, and the best thing to compare it to is probably Bill Clinton. So Bill Clinton, yeah, they really did hate him. They really fucking hated him. But it is true, I think, that specifically with Obama, not only is it an equal amount of hate, it's like an equal amount of hate, and then there's also like 3 or 4 tiny little other issues that can only be explained by race. So, the fact that they keep bringing up the
birth certificate
and the birth certificate, like there's no other way to explain that. You can't just pawn that one off to him being a Democrat. And actually, I'm willing to be somewhat charitable, I guess you could say, in my interpretation to the right on this, in the sense that I only want to bring up the race card when there's overwhelming evidence and there's really no other explanation. But even when we use the strictest standard, there are still a handful of issues where there is no other explanation.
And I remember back in the day when Palin was running for vice president with John McCain, they went to a few Palin rallies. By they, I mean, just YouTubers with cameras showing up to these rallies to talk to people. And, there was tons of just overt racism, like, we got to stop this Negro from becoming president, basically. And it's like, how do you explain that? And every time I talk to conservatives, like intelligent conservatives, I always ask them, like, how do you deal with all these like ignorant racist element in your party? And they're like, I've never seen that. I'm like, bullshit, you've never seen that.
Yeah, I think Lee Doran was one of the people that just totally denied that the Tea Party, especially,
the Tea Party had
racist.
No racists in it. It's like, so who am I going to believe, Lee Doran or my lying eyes and ears?
Right.
Yeah, it's certainly an issue. But like I said, just so we don't end up having to play defense when we shouldn't have to play defense. I only bring up the race card when I know it's the case. And
Sure.
the specific examples of that are the birth certificate, saying he's born in Kenya, calling him a Muslim. There are some issues where there's literally no other explanation, so you have to bring it up. I don't know how you don't bring it up. And by the way, like if you're around people who are fairly conservative and they think you're one of them, let's say, I think people underestimate casual racism. Like I think there's a lot of casual racism in America. Not like you don't have to be Bull Connor, sicking dogs on black people in the South in order to be a racist. There's a lot of like, well, you know how they are, like you know that they're not the same as us. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of that goes on in the country, and I've seen it myself. I've seen it with friends' fathers and stuff, where to them it's just like an of course thing. They're like, of course I'm racist. Like of course.
You're not American. Who do you work for now?
Them it's just like an of course thing. They're like, of course I'm racist. Like of course I don't. They wouldn't say it out loud, but it would be one of those things like, well, yeah, I know that we're different. I mean, look at the statistics. That's one of the things that they bring up all the time. But what they disregard is when you look at things like, incarceration rates and stuff like that, that there's also a massive societal problem which led to it. They think everything exists in a bubble. That, like, we all started at the 0-yard line in a 100-yard dash, and, like, somebody fired a gun and we all started running at the same time. But in reality, we all know that white people ran 80 yards ahead, and then black people were allowed to start running. So when you see statistics like, for example, the net worth statistics, where white people have a little bit over $120,000 in net worth on average, and black people have just $11,000. So a racist would point to that and say, see, black people are lazy, they don't work as hard, and the numbers prove it. But they totally disregard the fact that the majority reason for that is inheritance. That white people oftentimes get a lot of shit handed down to them from their parents and their grandparents because they were in a society where they could flourish. Whereas black people forget it was just the mid-1960s that black people were even treated on paper in an equal way in the country. And just because it was written down on paper doesn't mean that overnight, like everybody in the South was like, okay, we get it, we're going to treat black people equally. Nonsense. I mean, deep systemic racism still exists to this day, so there's good explanations as to why you see stuff like the net worth numbers and stuff. But racists disregard that.
I always feel like there's a certain segment of society, like the more conservative segment, that has this sense of they hate nuance in argument. They want everything to be very simple and direct, like a John Wayne movie. There's the bad guy, we're going to shoot him, They want that sort of simplistic answer. They don't like it. And if you even start to talk about nuance with them, they just regard you with hatred and suspicion almost instantly because you don't have this knee-jerk, one-step argument like, this is happening, therefore this, and let's not look at any other variables, let's not look at any other factors, let's not entertain any other possibilities, I think this, therefore it's true. And I mean, that you see that in their politics, you see that in their religious beliefs, you probably see it a lot in their personal lives too, although, obviously there's a huge spectrum there.
Look at O'Reilly. I think he's the perfect example of what you're talking about. As far as like the right-wing commentators go, he's actually probably the smartest of all of them. I think Hannity's much dumber than him. Rush Limbaugh is much dumber. Glenn Beck is much dumber. Like, he's the smartest of them all. And still, when you watch his show, everything is so black and white. And he actively avoids any nuance or any caveats or any branching out into a larger discussion. It's always like, boom, 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 that's it, and I'm not entertaining any other ideas.
Tide goes in, tide goes out. You can't explain that.
Can't explain that. Can't explain it. That's the perfect example of it.
He's a very simple-minded man. But he is intelligent,
He is. And by the way, have you been following any of his lies? He's also a compulsive liar, apparently.
Well, I've always known that about him. I mean...
No, but even about personal stuff that's like, there's no reason to lie. He can't help himself. He just kept lying. He lied about seeing nuns get shot. He lied about...
I mean, like, I feel like, especially with these news anchors, I kind of understand it because, when you are in the public eye to whatever extent, whether you're a YouTuber with 5,000 subscribers or you're, a news anchor or a politician or whatever, I feel like there's this, you feel like you need to be compelling. And I think that's what it is. It boils down to, I've seen all these things, I've been all these places, I've experienced all this, I'm very worldly. And I think that's the same reason that Brian Williams told his bullshit stories, the same reason that Bill O'Reilly tells his bullshit stories, because they want to seem like they're, almost this, Indiana Jones-esque, Edward R. Murrow type figure.
In a very similar fashion, a few years ago, when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, she told this story about back when she was First Lady. I guess she went to Bosnia or something like that.
Yeah.
And said that she was under machine gun fire, and then there was a video of her just walking around.
Yeah, and they said she felt like the wind from bullets whizzing by her face and shit.
And look, I think that stems from insecurity. I think that stems from insecurity because if you look at a liberal commentator, what's the liberal commentator version of that? I think you see it with a guy like Chris Hayes would try to get that reaction from people by just using really good arguments and using a lot of data. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's how these guys would try to get eyeballs on them. I better come with the facts and better make sure I'm really accurate. Whereas a guy like O'Reilly, for him to try to get eyeballs, it all stems from his insecurity, and he's like, yeah, I saw nuns get shot, and there was this JFK assassination guy where I heard him commit suicide. I was right out in front of the door. And he ends up lying about shit that there's no reason to lie about it unless you're trying to do exactly what you just explained, which is you're trying to be this grandiose character because you feel like deep down you're really not. You feel like you can't get the people to watch you if you're just yourself and if you just present your arguments and then go home and go to sleep. You feel like there has to be this extra level. But Bill, the way to get the extra level is to put in the extra work and to do the extra research and present a better argument. You know what I mean?
Or, if you actually want to be that worldly and experienced with, all of this stuff that's going on, why don't you actually go do that stuff,
And he would never. He's a limousine guy, driving.
Right, and if that's who you are, then be that. Don't try to fucking present yourself as something you're not.
He always does this I'm the common man thing. Dude, you make $20 million a year and you're a conservative Republican. That's the last category that would be considered one of the common men. You're not. You're obviously one of the elite.
No, not Bill. I think we could move on to another story here.
Sure. This next video is entitled Cruz, meaning Ted Cruz, at CPAC, saving America by ending net neutrality.
Something about a cruise at sea, I heard. Yeah.
The men and women gathered here today are going to play a critical role.
Look at him. It is fucking Joe McCarthy's clone. Look at him.
He looks exactly like him.
He does. He fucking does.
There's even one communist in the State Department.
Hey, this is kind of unrelated, and I know we're... Anyway, have you seen the movie Good Night and Good Luck?
I have not, no.
Well, anyway, it doesn't really matter. There was they showed clips of Joe McCarthy in that movie, and a lot of people actually complained that the actor who played Joe McCarthy was way over the top. He wasn't believable at all. It's like that was Joe McCarthy.
Oh man!
But yeah,
in reigniting the miracle of America. How do we do that? How do we win? How do we bring back the miracle that is America?
The miracle.
So folksy.
God bless you.
Elect me. I'm a miracle.
Number one, we reassemble the Reagan coalition.
Woo! What does that mean?
We bring...
Yeah.
What do you mean reassemble the Reagan coalition?
That doesn't mean anything. You just wanted to say the name Reagan. That's it.
Step one, blah blah blah, Reagan. Woo!
Reagan. I likes me some Reagan.
Step one, bring Reagan back from the dead.
together fiscal conservatives and social conservatives and national security conservatives.
What?
We stand
So
strong.
we just magically get rid of all the differences between these different types of people. How are you going to do that? You're just going to wave a magic wand? Fiscal conservatives and social conservatives will see eye to eye now.
I've heard of fiscal and social, but I've never heard of national security.
But he just means like warmongers, basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Ted Cruz is a really scary guy, man, because he's like, he strikes me as like one of those old school politicians that's like super sleazy and ready to cut backroom deals and like put on this giant facade for everybody else, and all he really cares about is his own power. I mean, you can tell, like, when he talks, most politicians, when they talk, you're like, that guy looks like he's bullshitting. But with Ted Cruz, it's like, it's on another level. Like, he's acting, you know what I mean?
Like, behind it all, you can hear him maniacally laughing. Suckers!
Yeah. He's so
He-
ingenuous. It's just, nothing's real about him.
You know, and I go to conservative websites like Drudge, and you know, every time Drudge posts a story that has a comment section on it, because they of course don't have any of their own stories, they just link to stories around the internet. But whenever they link to a story that has a comment section, you always see you're guaranteed to find the dumbest fucking people you've ever seen or heard of or could possibly imagine would exist. And I feel like those people are solidly for Ted Cruz, because like they'll do stories like covering like Rand Paul or something, like Rand Paul said this, and if the Drudge Report links to it, I'll go to the comment section and it'll be like, who gives a fuck what Rand Paul says? We all know Ted Cruz is going to be the next president.
Can Ted Cruz even be president? Because from what I understand, he was born in Canada and his dad was born in Cuba.
Ben, he is white.
He's not totally
He's
white.
pretty much white. Look at him. He's white enough.
The argument has been made that all that matters is the vagina of the woman you're coming out of. If she's an American, you're an American. That's basically the argument they make about him.
Well, then why does that argument apply to Obama, though? Then?
Exactly, that's the point, man. These guys are they're so open with their hypocrisy.
The goalposts
Like,
just
they don't-
move all around the field.
Yeah, I don't know if they understand that hypocrisy is a thing. Like, I don't know if they understand the concept. Like, somebody has to explain it to them. Like, no, you can't do that because you just changed the standard, you idiot.
I think they know hypocrisy is a thing, but they just utilize it as a weapon. You know.
Exactly. You know what it is? They believe that hypocrisy is this menial little thing that's irrelevant because they're fighting for something that's a higher truth. It's like what you see with religious people. Like, if
The
somebody's
ends justify the means.
Exactly. So like it's fine if they'll contradict themselves. A religious person will contradict themselves making an argument, and then when you point it out, they're like, that's irrelevant because I'm correct on the larger point, which is my religion is true.
Yeah, that's like
God is real. That's the real thrust of this. Anyway, let's hear more of Ted Cruz's bullshit
Okay.
reasons how he's going to fix America. Or
yeah,
whatever.
and he'll get to net neutrality in about a minute.
Good. Yeah.
Let's see.
For economic growth. But we also stand for life and marriage.
Woo.
We defend constitutional rights. But we also stand and lead the fight against ISIS and a nuclear Iran.
Wait a minute. How is that a but moment? He said, we'll uphold the Constitution, but we'll fight ISIS.
As if
Like-
it contradicts the Constitution. That's hilarious.
I know, like, what's with the but? I mean, I don't see how fighting ISIS would be unconstitutional anyway.
That's such a good point. It didn't occur to me either that, like, I know this contradicts the ISIS segment of the Constitution, but...
We need all three legs of the proverbial Republican stool. Not one leg, not two, but the way we get to 51% is we bring together conservatives and libertarians and evangelicals and women and young people and Hispanics and Reagan Democrats.
Reagan Democrats.
All three of them?
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, I mean, in 1981, there was probably quite a few Reagan Democrats if you just look at the election map. But now, not so many.
Okay. I mean, it's... I've heard, you know, you actually touched on something earlier, Ben, about the three, like now there's three kinds of Republicans, you know, because the traditional dichotomy really has been fiscal and social, and now I guess he's adding the warrior Republicans. But a three-legged stool, I mean, those do exist, of course, but I mean, it's not, a three-legged stool is not that stable. You really want a four-legged one. So I think he needs to come up with one more category of Republican, you know? I guess that's like the secret racist category they don't want to own up to.
No,
Our invisible fourth leg.
Yeah, most of them fall into that already. The only one that's somewhat respectable is the libertarian wing, but
yeah,
even there, it's like they get kind of kooky on issues of regulation and safety nets.
Right. When they had the last presidential election and they were still at the stage where there was all these different Republicans trying to get it, the one that I liked the most was Gary Johnson, and they wouldn't even let him back for the second debate. He was in the first debate, and then he was, you know, strangely absent from everyone after that.
Because they saw he made sense, and they knew they had to get rid of him.
It's kind of crazy when you think about it that like that party has not moderated itself at all, because I don't know. I keep saying I don't know how much longer it could last with them being so fringy, but it just keeps happening. I mean, Rick Santorum and Mike Huckabee are going to run again. Those fucking crazy Christian Taliban fuckheads. Like, that's insane to think that they're running and they think they have a shot, and like they'll get cheers the debates and shit. Like, you don't see that. Look, I have a lot of problems with the Democrats, man. I really do. But you don't see, they're not as stupid. They're just not that stupid. The Republicans are just mind-numbingly stupid.
All right, we'll see what he says here.
And how do we do that? We do that fundamentally by standing with the people and not with Washington.
Yeah! Fuck yeah! People!
Whatever that means.
Washington wants Obamacare. The people want liberty.
Yeah!
Liberty!
Pause it for a sec. What? Okay. This is one of those lies where if the Democrats knew anything about how to play politics correctly, they could eat Ted Cruz's lunch and they could eat all the Republicans' lunch on this. You always hear them say, Obamacare is unpopular with the American people. And they actually have one poll that they point to where it's true that a majority of people, a slight majority, like 52% or 53%, are like, yeah, we don't like it. But the problem is they've done more in-depth polling where they ask issue by issue, do you like Obamacare? And on the actual provisions themselves, virtually all of them, not only are they popular, they're overwhelmingly popular. It's like 70% plus on all of them. So if the Democrats had any clue what the fuck they were doing in terms of playing politics, they could destroy the Republicans on this point and be like, okay, it's unpopular. Is it really? Well, look at these numbers here. It turns out that overwhelming majority love the provision where people up to the age of 26 get to stay on their parents' health insurance. Overwhelming majority of people like the provision that 80% of health insurance money now needs to actually go to care itself, as opposed to in the past it was like 50-50, and a lot of the money went to overhead and stupid bullshit. Look at this provision right here, the Medicaid expansion, overwhelmingly popular. Look at the provision that bans pre-existing conditions, overwhelmingly popular. But the Democrats don't know how to play politics, so Ted Cruz says shit like this, and he gets away with it. And of course the media sucks, so they don't call him out on it either.
And you know, another thing about what he just said is, I love when these politicians are always like, these fucks in Washington. It's like, what, you mean like you? I mean, like, you're one of the most prominent politicians in America, you dipshit. This is like when Bill O'Reilly gets on The Factor and starts talking about the media. It's
the
like,
mainstream media.
You are the mainstream media.
Yeah,
you are Washington.
He's
literally number one in the ratings.
Yeah, number one.
I mean, like, what is the disconnect here? Like, I mean, like, this guy, Ted Cruz, one of the most prominent politicians in America, is like, Washington, fuck those bastards in Washington. Like, you're one of them. Bill O'Reilly, fuck the mainstream media. You are the mainstream media. Where is the disconnect here? Is it just because they know the people they're talking to are so stupid that they'll not catch this themselves?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that going in there. I mean, Ted Cruz, he went to a good school, I think. Like, he's one of those guys particularly fucked up because he might actually be aware. You know what I mean? Like, he is more sleazy than just stupid. Like, if you look at Rick Santorum or Mike Huckabee, you could just go, oh, that guy's a simple fuck. But you look at Ted Cruz and you're like, oh, that dude, like, he's lying. Like, he's duping people over. Like, he actually knows what the fuck he's doing. You know, you could see this guy. He's a huge fucking sellout. Look at the money he takes from, all of his corporate donors and shit and all the elite, and then he goes out there and rips the elite. Like, no, he knows what he's doing, as opposed to some other Republicans who are just dumb.
Not stupid, just evil.
Washington wants amnesty. The people want rule of law.
Yeah! Talking point, woo!
Washington wants power over the internet. The people want freedom online.
What the fuck?
Hold on, let's wait. Wait to see what he says.
And don't believe President Obama when he says, if you like your internet, you can keep your internet.
Oh, fuck.
Okay.
That shit.
First of all, the supposed lie about healthcare was the most blown out of proportion piece of propaganda bullshit I've ever seen. It got Lie of the Year from PolitiFact. Those dumb motherfuckers over there didn't take 2 seconds to look in a little further and realize that when he told that lie, you know why it was a lie? Because, yeah, you can't keep your health care. It ends up you're going to pay less and get more care. You pay less and get better quality coverage. So, yeah, you can't keep your health care because it got f***ing better. So as far as the lies go, it was an absolutely wonderful lie. So the guy, he's just a fucking cunt. I can't take it.
But not only that though. I mean, like, look, I when Obama even said that line, he was pushing for a different version of Obamacare to begin with.
I didn't even know that. That's interesting.
It got compromised down from that, if I'm not mistaken, because back it was like there's going to be a public option. You know, we might even have single payer. No, none of that happened. You know, basically Obamacare just turned into like, you know, whatever, an insurance mandate and regulated the insurance industry more because, you know, obviously that was a pretty fucked up industry. And anyone who knows about the practices that the insurance industry was using, like you said, if you actually ask people about the individual policies of Obamacare, it's thumbs up across the board. But then somehow, when you present it to them as a whole, they're like, no, I don't like it.
Yeah, because the Republicans are good at messaging, man. But net neutrality, though, on that issue, Ted Cruz flipped the issue on its head. Because the FCC rules just keep the internet exactly as it is. But he's making it seem like it's the opposite.
Yeah, like, I love that. You know, basically the FCC is just trying to preserve the status quo and keep the telecoms from shoving their fucking cocks up our asses a few more inches. And you know, basically it's like the telecoms want to, you know, basically control the speed of the internet. Like, oh, you just run some shitty little vlog. Well, our blog, you know, you get the slow lane. You're a giant corporation that can give us a bunch of money. You get the fast lane.
Yeah, like Netflix and Hulu or whatever.
Right, and you know, it's just an extortion racket. It's just a way to make the internet worse, but for them to make more money in the process. Because even though they're not a national monopoly, all of these telecoms pretty much monopolize whatever area they're in.
Yeah,
you know.
By the way, do you think Ted Cruz is lying or stupid on the net neutrality issue?
Oh wow!
I gotta go with lying across the board.
Yeah, I would say lying.
He's just, you know, I agree with you. He's basically just an evil, soulless, sociopathic fuck. And you know, I feel like he'll say anything. He'll spew out any line. He doesn't care. You know, and really, like, what we just watched was a series of meaningless statements that have absolutely no substance to them whatsoever. It's
That's
just
what most of the stuff at CPAC is, anyway.
Sure, but I mean, like, but he's just the master of it 24/7. That's all he does is
Glenn Beck also said the same thing as Ted Cruz on net neutrality, and I'm convinced that Glenn Beck is just stupid. He's not lying because his business would actually be affected if the side that he's lobbying for wins. So I think Glenn Beck is just dumb, whereas Ted Cruz, I on that particular issue, I don't know if he's lying or stupid. I'd have to like really think about it and look into it more. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's lying for sure. But what's weird about the net neutrality issue is you have big money on both sides, and it just ended up that we were lucky that the big money affected the better side more, because you had Google and Amazon and all these other huge companies on our side, whereas on the other side it was like Comcast and Verizon and the internet service providers. So we just lucked out that more of the big money was on our side.
The most trusted companies in America.
All right.
Verizon, Comcast, Time Warner, all those guys.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Everybody loves them.
All right, we'll move on to the next story. This next story is, I believe his name is Inhofe, and he's addressing Congress with some pretty concrete evidence as to why climate change, a.k.a. global warming, is not happening. It's definitely not happening. So
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I gotta.
Mr. President was not here at that time, and so you don't have the advantage of knowing the story that's behind this. And the story that's behind this that's back when they first started all the hysteria on global warming.
Yeah.
And it happened to be a snowstorm that had been unprecedented. It set a record that year. And there's a charming family of 6, I say to my friend in the chair, that built this. And their picture is here. And that happens to be my daughter and her family of 6. And at that time, it got a lot of attention. Actually, it got a lot of national attention. And in case we have forgotten, because we keep hearing that 2014 has been the warmest year on record, I asked the chair, you know what this is?
He brought in a fucking snowball. This guy's a senator. This is like one of the people that actually runs the country.
By the way, for everybody listening right now, as they're listening to the show, open up another tab, go to Google, type in Jim Inhofe Open Secrets. Click. It's one of the first 5 links or so. You'll see it. Just click the link. Tell me what the number one industry is that gives him money when he runs. Oil and gas.
Wow,
I know because I covered this. I covered this story today, and I wasn't shocked to see that when I went to Open Secrets.
You guys. Look, this is a very persuasive argument. You know, I don't think you understand the nuance of this argument, so I'm going to explain it to you guys. Ben, Kyle, listen. Snow exists.
It's cold, right?
Hold on. Number one premise: snow exists. Therefore, global warming is false. Climate change isn't real. Yeah.
Snow is cold, man. Snow is cold. You libtard.
It's so cold. If it's cold, then that can't be.
Warming?
Right. Yeah, let's ignore the southern hemisphere where it's actually summertime right now and it's hot as fuck.
Also,
weather
go
versus
ahead.
Climate. That's the point. Weather versus climate. He's talking about weather. Weather is irrelevant. Climate is when you take all the weather events and put them together and look at the fucking pattern, and the pattern, regardless of what it's like right now, or if there's snow in fucking North Dakota, the pattern is clear that the temperature's going up. And by the way, when people look at it, they go, yeah, but it's only going up 1.3 degrees, bro. Who cares? But the problem is, if you listen to the scientists or the experts on this, they say that throws the entire ecosystem off. It's going to lead to increased famine, increased drought, increased natural disasters. Fresh water in certain areas is gonna go away, like in the Midwest in the U.S. They get their water from the mountaintops, and when the snow caps melt, where the fuck are they gonna get their water from? You would say underground, but guess what? Underground is ruined too because of fracking, because they're exempt from the Clean Air and Clean Water Act, so they get to dump all their chemicals in the underground reservoirs. So
I'm sure those chemicals are good for people. Don't worry.
He's just. This guy wrote a book about climate change being a hoax. He wrote a book about it, and his argument is, hey, the scientists are corrupt. The scientists are chasing money.
Please tell me that the book's called is Not a Snowball's Chance in Hell.
You should have told him that, because it would have been awesome if it was. No, he thinks that scientists are greedy and they try to get government grants and they get rich off government grants, and that's why there's a conspiracy on the left about this. He totally.
I think he's projecting.
He ignores, fossil fuel companies and oil companies, and he also disregards the fact that government scientists make dick. They make nothing, and they do really hard work.
Snowball, and that's just from outside here. So it's very, very cold out,
Wow.
very unseasonal. So here, Mr. President, catch this.
That's my case, man. Do I need to say anything else, bro? I rest my case.
So,
It's cold
I
outside.
mean, like, who is persuaded by this?
I think
Probably
a lot
the
of
people who
are.
voted for him.
I don't know.
I think a lot of people are, man. I really do, because I don't think, and I don't think
I
the
don't
idea of weather versus climate has been explained to a lot of people. I don't think they understand the concept of like peer-reviewed, double-blind studies. I think that they're just like it's a visceral thing. Snow, cold. That's not global warming. I think a lot of people, unfortunately, are convinced by that.
I don't understand that at all. I mean, like, because you know,
smart.
like, I mean, like, but the thing is, I'm not that smart. You know, I'm reasonably intelligent, but I'm not like a fucking super genius. I feel like I don't even feel. I feel like just everyone else is just really stupid. Not everyone else, but like people who are like buying into this shit, looking at this James Inhofe, like, look, snow, global warming my ass, like. If you're persuaded by that, like, how do you even get dressed in the morning? How do you fucking know which fucking shoe goes on which foot?
It's that the problem is like 90% of people have never read in any article that references science. Most people are just, going to work and picking up their... Science. Most people are just, going to work and picking up their kids, and they don't think about this shit. But then if they happen to see, something like this for a split second, they'll just be like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, I think it just brushes off. Like, it's just another thing that they see where it might, impact their beliefs on it in just a casual way, where later on in conversation, if it's brought up, they're like, I don't know if there's global warming. It has been cold recently, and there's a lot of snow now.
Very strange.
All right, so we'll move on to the next story. The next story is Washington, D.C. To defy GOP and implement marijuana law.
Woo!
This strain is a strain called Mrs. Buttersworth.
Does not. This strain is a strain. It's called Mrs. Buttersworth.
Instant classic. I already love this.
Want to be identified because what he's doing now in a cramped apartment with a view of the U.S. Capitol is illegal. In a few hours, that will change.
It is illegal, what you're doing right now.
Very much.
It won't be illegal tomorrow, correct?
That is correct.
What is that like, to come out of the shadows, as it were?
It's literally, for me, literally coming out of the closet. I can literally take my tent out of this closet.
Legal?
It is literally, though. It's funny.
That's the marijuana
here.
They're talking about him coming out of the shadows, but he's still blurred out.
Recreational gold rush in Colorado. Users here in Washington, D.C. can grow up to 6 plants, carry up to 2 ounces, give up to 1 ounce to anyone over 21 years old. But neither money, goods, nor services can exchange hands. It's a share or gift economy. But still.
It's literally a freedom for something that I'm so passionate about, knowing that it's legal, it's decriminalized, all of the above. I'm free.
In a letter to D.C.'s mayor, the chairman of a powerful U.S. congressional committee which has ultimate authority over the District of Columbia, issued a stern warning, writing, if you decide to move forward tomorrow with the legalization of marijuana in the district, you will be doing so in knowing and willful violation of the law.
Yeah.
Breaking the law,
So
breaking the law.
That's the thing that kind of worried me when I first heard about this in D.C. because it is a federal district. It's not a state. And, in the states where they made recreational cannabis legal, it's up to the governors to really enforce those laws. And in the federal district, I think they adhere to much different laws than they would in the states.
This is I've been cautioning people on my show about the contradictions in our marijuana laws, I should say, because it's fucked right now. Like, yeah, it's fantastic that Colorado's doing what they're doing and Washington's doing what they're doing. Now Alaska's kind of sort of doing it, but they don't have any places where they sell it, but it's technically legal to possess now. But, like, the problem is the way the Constitution works because of the supremacy clause, federal law overrides state law. So therefore, weed is still illegal on a federal level, and it's also a Schedule I drug, which means that according to the categorization under law right now, there's not even an accepted medicinal use for weed, which means that not only is Colorado in violation and Washington in violation, but also the 23 states that have medical marijuana. They're all technically in violation. At any point in time, the federal government can change on a dime and say, fuck it, I'm going to go crack down on them. So God forbid we have a President Chris Christie or a President Marco Rubio or Paul Ryan or even Hillary Clinton in a bad mood, because who knows what the fuck she really thinks on the issue of weed. All it takes is a president to just change their mind as to how we're going to enforce the law, and it's over. They could shut down all of it. So we really need to fight to change the law on a federal level, because it's all fun and games on a state level, but that's not lasting. And I don't think people understand that, how quickly it can go away given the wrong person being elected.
And so which angle should they attack the issue? Should it be considered like a rights issue, like we have the right to put what we want in our own body?
I would, me personally, I think that that's the argument that resonates most with me. I mean, I think all the other arguments happen to line up on our side as well, in terms of you decrease crime if you legalize, because when it's illegal, it goes underground to the black market, and there's more crime on the black market than if you were to legalize it. So all the arguments line up. Me personally, I think that argument is persuasive. The argument of, look, my body's my temple, I get to put in it whatever the fuck I want, and you can piss off. But I don't know if I don't know if the Supreme Court would rule that way, though. I wish they would, but I don't think they would. So I think what you're going to have to do is somehow get it through Congress, and I don't know. I don't see that happening right now, especially with a Republican majority in the House and the Senate.
You know, it's interesting.
I don't know how to win on it yet.
TJ and I watched a documentary a few months ago, kind of showing the whole campaign to legalize recreational cannabis in Washington. And it was really interesting, like the people that were trying to get the law passed, they even got Rick Steves to be their spokesman. He was like a famous travel journalist from Washington. But the weirdest part about it was that the strongest opposition to them passing the law wasn't anti-cannabis people. It was people that thought that the law was too restrictive. It was so interesting.
Oh, wow, that's weird.
Yeah, well, what it was is it was people who didn't like what the law said about, you know,
zero tolerance for drivers,
right? Drivers and stuff, and they're like, well, I use marijuana medicinally, and you know, there's no exemption for us, so you know, I can't even I'm in pain if I'm not smoking my weed, so. Yeah. What if I need that, and then I'm driving my vehicle, and then I could go away because these laws, and you know, and also it was a lot of the shop owners and stuff who didn't want, you know, the increased competition.
Yeah, the medical dispensary
owners.
You know? Yeah,
it was really interesting. Keep in mind, though, you're also going to see a lot of opposition, and we've already seen it on the federal level. From the DEA, because the entire DEA is based on drugs being illegal. That's how they make their money. That's why they all have jobs. And when you have administrations that want to go softer on drugs and want to push the country in a different direction, they know that their jobs are threatened, and they know that they might lose their jobs. So they're not fucking around, man. Like, they'll do anything to keep their jobs. So you're going to get a lot of resistance from the DEA, and you're also going to get a lot of resistance. This resistance really pisses me off. Ironically, from big pharma and alcohol companies, because they view weed as competition. Now, I've always argued, though, that like I don't understand why you don't have people, you know, if you're the CEO of Budweiser or whatever, why the fuck don't you try to get ahead of the situation, and why don't you try to sell it yourself, legalize it and sell it yourself? You already have a good brand name with, you know, your alcohol. Why not do the same thing with weed? So that really pisses me off that big pharma and alcohol companies fight it.
Yeah, just make like new Budweiser with Bud. You know, it's got a small dose of THC in every can. Get high while you get drunk.
Wow, that's the only thing that would get me to drink Budweiser.
And
yeah,
how much
Ben is a beer snob.
How much would this help the economy, man? It would be such a tremendous help, because look in Colorado right now, they literally have more money than they know what to do with, because of all the revenue raised. There's like a 30-something% tax on weed sales, and everybody's like, fuck it, I don't care, I'll pay it.
But what about all the murders and What about all the murders and rapes and children prostituting themselves to get weed?
Yeah.
What about that?
No, dude, it's a fucking epidemic. It's everywhere.
And like I was referencing before, as I'm sure you guys already know, look at the best model to see what's so fucked up about this is prohibition. I mean, during prohibition of alcohol, the mafia became incredibly powerful because they were selling all the alcohol. They had a monopoly on the market. So you actually created more crime by banning alcohol. By the same token, why do you think Mexico is a narco state? Why do you think the drug cartels are so powerful? Because you've banned drugs and you've given them all the money.
I hate how you sissy-ass liberals are always trying to learn shit from history.
We would encourage the Congress to not be so concerned about overturning what 7 out of 10 voters said should be the law in the District of Columbia.
Adam Ettinger organized the legalization effort.
Do you think there will be a backlash to any of this?
There'll be a huge backlash if Congress manages to overturn the initiative. There will be protests in the streets. You know, our city council will be performing acts of civil disobedience.
He says despite protests from some powerful members of Congress, legalization in the nation's capital is just another sign of growing public acceptance nationwide.
Get it, guys?
We cannot wait for politicians to get on the ball here. People are going to jail for this, you know, thousands of people a year.
They should have thought about that before they broke the goddamn law.
By the way, going back to the point about revenue, that they literally have more money than they know what to do with. I'm not kidding about that. They raise so much money in revenue that there's a provision in the Colorado State Constitution which says that if you raise a certain amount of money from a given thing, that you have to give like a tax rebate to the people. So people are going to get a check in the mail. They're actually considering what to do right now with the surplus, but it's likely the case that people are going to get a check in the mail in Colorado from the gigantic surplus because of marijuana sales.
Well, I hope everyone who opposed it turns that check down.
Yeah,
right?
give it back.
Know, right? Absolutely.
I love how an entire state is like cutting weed profits now. Like we're all in on we're all in this together now, guys.
But from what I understand,
here's your cut.
because it's still federally illegal, the marijuana industry in these states is a cash-only industry.
Well, actually, there's been a little bit of a change in that recently. So Obama and Holder, they drafted new rules to allow the marijuana industry to get in on banking. But then I think the banks themselves still said no, even after the rules were drafted. So technically they're allowed to do it, but the banks, I think, are saying no. So, yeah, there was this blossoming industry in Colorado that was all based around, well, how do we handle this cash without getting fucking robbed? So there's, like, armed guards and shit with these tremendous, armored vehicles. And, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's like living in the Twilight Zone, looking at one state doing something intelligent, and all the other ones, or I should say most of the other ones, are like, they act like they don't see how smart this is and how good this is for the economy and how good this is for freedom.
Banks not wanting to take money is also very strange.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's very strange in America where people refuse money from any source. You know?
HSBC did business with Al-Qaeda. There's a recent story. We covered it on my show. They did business with Al-Qaeda, with Mexican drug cartels, with the Iranian government when there were sanctions and they weren't allowed to do it. But when it comes to, I should not speak because I don't know if HSBC in particular said they're not accepting money from Colorado. But it does strike me as fucked up that a lot of banks are not taking anything in Colorado while HSBC was doing business with fucking terrorists.
Yeah.
On the same subject here is a clip, someone talking about how marijuana stifles the American dream.
All over America, marijuana is becoming more legal in different states, and you can.
First of all, look at that phone. Look at that phone
from 1986.
Yeah.
You can go anywhere in this nation and buy alcohol, and there's a tax on this, and a revenue that can be used for the good of whatever tax money goes for. And if we legalize marijuana in Wisconsin, not just for recreational use, but for medicinal use, wouldn't that be a benefit for the state?
Okay, we'll have them address that issue.
And
yeah,
let there be rules and laws. You can't drive anywhere after having too many beers or whatever it is you drink. And that being said, on that same token, couldn't there be, or shouldn't there also be laws where if you had too much to smoke, for example, you can't drive?
Steve, we're going to tackle that issue. Legalizing marijuana on a national basis here.
Well,
I mean,
think
the source of revenue he's talking about.
Right, there's some people, their whole goal is to get more money for the government. That's not my major goal, so I disagree with your caller on that. But one thing that kind of struck me, first of all, being in Washington, I get to talk to congressmen from states in which marijuana is much more legal than here, Washington, Colorado. They do not think it's working out very well. And finally, a lot has been written about the income gap in our country and how the poor people aren't making enough money or saving enough money. I want to ask your caller, assuming one of the goals we have in this country is to help people make more money, be part of the American dream. If we legalize marijuana across the board, what effect does he think that's going to have on people? Is that going to cause say the underclass or whatever to improve more, or is it going to create even a larger segment of Americans who's not achieving their full possibility and falling behind? And I think if you want to make sure that all Americans are participating in the American dream, all Americans are having a good job where someday they're going to be able to afford to take care of kids, buy a house, I do not think legalizing marijuana is a way to work towards that.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all,
what about alcohol? I said, what about alcohol? I mean, they always do this, where they grandfather in the one substance that's actually worse than the other substances in terms of how harmful it is on your body. They grandfather that one in, and then they start arguing that, this isn't good for society, this isn't good for individuals, and yada, yada, yada. It's like, you're not allowed to just grandfather that one in and then argue. You have to, all the drugs need to be on the table when you're having this conversation. So I would ask that guy, so if you're being consistent, you want to ban alcohol too, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, too, that, this guy, he's sitting here, isn't that's like social engineering. You're trying to say, we're going to try to encourage this behavior and discourage that behavior. It's like, I thought you guys were supposed to be the ones who are all about, liberty and personal choice. Yeah. I mean, that's like your buzzwords.
Except when they pick it, yeah.
Right, unless you get to pick the nanny, basically. But I mean, look, he's sitting there, and this ridiculous assertion, like it's based on ridiculous stereotypes, like, if people are smoking weed, they're gonna lose all motivation and no one's gonna want to work.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
totally untrue.
What do you think? I mean, like,
totally untrue.
I think he thinks like of weed, and he just like Cheech and Chong appear in his mind or something.
Hey, man.
Yeah, dude, I'll go further than that. I mean, I think that most people, if you talk to most people, first of all, most people are casual drug users, 80 to 90%, according to Dr. Carl Hart, who's an expert on this stuff. 80 to 90% of drug users of all drugs are casual users. And the second thing is, I think, honestly, people probably take substances for the opposite reason. Like, he makes it seem like somebody does drugs and then they literally don't do anything. I mean, I know people who they'll do drugs and then they go to work, and it actually makes them look forward to the day more, not less.
Yeah, it's like, man, I can't believe I gotta go back to Subway and cut these fucking sandwiches again. I know, I'll get high first. Oh, now this is pretty tolerable.
Exactly. And I'm fine. I mean, as long as they're not doing something where, like, obviously, being high on various substances would get in the way, then I don't give a shit. Like, go ahead, smoke and do whatever, as long as you're doing, your job, go right ahead.
I don't want heroin junkies building the space shuttle or something, but
cutting sandwiches at Subway is different than being like a commercial airline pilot or something like that.
Sure, but I mean, you shouldn't be on. I mean, there's plenty of legal ways that you could be too fucked up to fly a plane.
Sure,
absolutely.
And no one says anything about those
because they're grandfathered in. Right, that's hypocrisy I'm talking about. If somebody has a bad back and they pop Percocets all day, people just say, what do you mean? He's got a prescription and he has a bad back. Of course, that's fine. But if that same person smokes weed, it's like, oh, you're smoking weed. What are you doing? It's like the same fucking thing they'd be doing with the Percocet.
I've had some injuries in the past, and I can definitely attest that Percocet fucks you up way worse than weed. You could smoke all the weed in front of you. You could have like an ounce of weed in front of you. You'd never feel as fucked up as you would off of Percocets ever.
have an affinity for those drugs in particular. I don't know why, man, but for weed, for me, I've spoken about this before on my podcast. I don't know why, but a lot of the times when I smoked weed, this is just speaking me personally. I know pretty much many people's experience is the opposite, but I got like paranoid. I had a couple. Couple times
I have that happen sometimes too.
Yeah, most of the time I was paranoid, so I'm not a big fan of weed. I'm actually a bigger fan of the pills.
Well,
it has to do with the strain and the THC to CBD content. The what ratio between those two drugs in the cannabis you have.
And I also think there's something going on there too with like brain chemistry, person to person, and it may even have something to do with family history with different substances too, because there's some people like they'll do a line of coke and they're like, fuck it, I'm done, I like this, where other people will do it and they're like, this just makes me jittery and nervous and I don't like it. By the same token with Percocet, some people will take it and go, I feel woozy and dizzy and it makes me feel weird and nauseous, whereas somebody else will take it like, I'll take it and it'll just make me feel happy, right?
Yeah.
So I think it varies big time.
Sure.
Person to person, from each individual person to chemistry of the other person.
I've known plenty of people who love Valium, but for me, that's just like, bleh.
Percocet makes you happy and itchy.
But the thing is, too,
it made you itchy. That's funny. It never made me itchy before, but I have heard a lot of people do say it makes them itchy.
It itches so good.
As far as the weed thing goes, being paranoid and shit, like I have that too, but after I smoke it like 3 or 4 days in a row, the paranoia pretty much stops. Why I smoke something that makes me paranoid for 4 days, I don't know. But I'm such a naturally paranoid person anyway. All weed really does is give me more imaginative things to be paranoid about. So maybe it's just a break from the monotony of being paranoid about mundane things.
The few times where I had a good high on weed, it was awesome. It was the best thing ever. If I could recreate the feeling I had when I had the good highs, I'd smoke it all the time. But it just so happens that half the time or so, I was curled in a fetal position, shaking, like, oh, what's happening?
In a situation where you could buy cannabis through a retail setting, you can actually choose what you want and what effects you would get.
Yeah.
Or also through medical.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
you could probably find a strain that would be more beneficial to you, but when you're dealing with a black,
if it was legal, I'd go and do it for sure. I'd go and do it.
Sure, when you're dealing with a black market, though, it's not the same level of reliability for sure.
The black. I mean, you always feel fucked up and weird. Like everybody knows, I talk about it all the time. I am a recreational drug user, and it's like whenever you buy something, you're like, it just feels gross because there's like this veil of it not being respectable. It's like you're looked down upon for doing this thing, which is actually a totally normal thing when you look at human history. I mean,
sure.
I covered a story on my show the other day that like people have been getting drunk and getting high for so fucking long, man. And that it's like you could argue that's actually more natural. Like it's not natural to be sober all the time. Every once in a while, you need to perforate your reality with like, boom, a big upper, a big downer, or a psychedelic, or whatever.
I mean, all you're doing is just fucking with your brain chemistry and, discovering new perspectives inside yourself.
Have you guys ever done psychedelics?
Yep.
Yes.
Only when I was very young, though. Well, not very young. I don't want like a toddler. But,
So,
like
what
high school days.
Was it mushrooms? Was it LSD? What was it?
Both.
Only LSD for me. I never did shrooms.
And what did you guys think of it? That's the one drug category where I've never experimented, and I have to say I'm scared to death of it. I'm scared to death of it.
With LSD, it changed my perception of a lot of things, especially while on it. Even after, I still had. I wouldn't say I was a drastically different person, but I would say carrying over, there was always something left there that I had learned to look at something differently.
Sure. I think every person I've ever known that's done LSD has been at least a little bit different afterwards. Like, it does change people's personalities.
And then mushrooms was similar, but more physically intense, and I got a stomach ache from them because they start fizzing up in your stomach and your stomach wants to reject them. And then And you'd get like a hangover sometimes from the mushrooms, but I've never, from LSD, never had a hangover or anything like that.
When I was on LSD,
you can't sleep either for like 10 hours.
Have either of you ever seen the Japanese animated movie Akira?
Yes.
Have you seen
No.
that, Kyle? Okay. Well, there's a scene where the main character, some kind of mad science-y type shit happens to him, and there's a scene where he loses control over like his cellular growth, and he starts expanding in every direction in a very like gross and graphic way, to the point where he actually another character becomes like trapped in like walls of his flesh and is crushed. And when I was on LSD, I thought my friend's leg was growing at that rate, and I was like grabbing it, trying to prevent the growth and shit.
Yeah, normally when you're experiencing psychedelics, the best thing to do is to make sure, for one, that you're a person that's easily grounded in reality. You don't let your mind wander off on you. Also, to be with people
that does not describe me.
Also, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Also to be with people that you trust. I wouldn't go out. I've known people that went to like, festivals, like music festivals and parties on that. I would never do that. I'd rather just sit at home.
Yeah, it's funny because I think you hit the nail on the head there with the whole idea of like you have to be a somewhat grounded person, because even with weed is mildly psychoactive. And, you could argue that when I had those paranoid, nervous experiences on weed, it's because that's it, for whatever reason, I think I'm like that, where like certain hallucinogenic drugs, psychedelic drugs, it's like I'm just predisposed to not having a good trip. I feel like I'd immediately have a bad trip. I'm just scared of the concept of like seeing shit that's not there and having. It's just so different from what I'm used to. Whereas the drugs I've taken,
don't you want to see the demons and monsters?
Well, you'd have to take either high doses or some really strong stuff to see things that aren't there. Normally what happens, if you do get visuals at all, is that things that you see look different. Like you'll see something like a table, and it'll almost look like
patterns, right? I heard that a lot. Yeah.
I would see everyday objects, whether it be a tree outside or a table, and it would look like it was breathing. Like things expand and contract when they breathe. That's how things usually would look for me.
Everything to me started feeling like a Picasso painting almost.
Yeah,
where it was like I could see the dimensions, but everything looked very flat.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I was existing in a very two-dimensional realm.
It's funny because when here in the U.S., when we talk about countries that have legalized cannabis and nothing bad happened, we talk about the Netherlands a lot. One thing that was interesting when I went over there and visited is that natural psychedelics are also legal there too. You can go to the store and buy peyote and mushrooms and things like that. Not LSD, but things like that in a normal store. Like you could buy weed there also.
Right.
And their society is not crumbling, and there's not hallucinating people all over the streets.
Yeah.
So
no, I think I'm a crazy person, and I think that since I'm a crazy person, if I take that stuff, I don't know. I like the drugs I've taken. What they do is they either bring your mood up,
yeah,
or they bring your mood down, and like that's why I'm a big fan of drugs. Like I think that's a fascinating thing and a great thing that could be a tool for people. Like I do think it's a tool where sometimes people are too amped up and too paranoid and nervous all the time, and hey, dude, you deserve a Xanax. Like, let's chill out. It's cool. Like, have a Xanax, watch some TV or some, you know what I mean? Like that has always been something that I view in a positive light. But the whole idea of psychedelics is like, I already think I'm a crazy person, and I would fear a bad trip so much that I would manifest it into reality. You know what I mean?
You probably would, yes. If you go into it that mindset, you probably will. And they're not for everyone. But it's so crazy to look back at like, the early to mid 60s.
Yeah.
And how you can tell when LSD started to affect popular culture.
That's right. Yeah.
Just like in art, in fashion, in music, all of that stuff.
You know what I think I'm going to do? I think I'm going to keep the psychedelic card in my back pocket until down the road, I'm towards the end of my life and I'm getting sick or something, and I know the time is limited. And like that's when I'll use it and hope for a transformational experience. Because I read studies that work that helped older people who were basically in hospice care and they're going to die soon. They did these studies where they gave them all different psychedelics, and virtually all of them were like, yeah, no, this changed my life. Like, this is great. Like, they weren't depressed anymore, even though they were about to die.
Yeah, I think they've used it for post-traumatic stress disorder in the past. I don't know if they use it
for that too. MDMA for that.
I know the inventor of LSD, Dr. Albert Hofmann. He was a Swiss scientist. He took LSD dozens of times throughout his life, and he lived to be about 100 years old.
So there you go.
Strange.
LSD makes you
live
longer and increases your longevity.
And I don't think people realize that when you talk about psychedelics, like that's not a category of drug that is conducive to addiction. Like there's no, you know what I mean? Like that's not a thing. Like that's not one of those, like, oh, if I take this mushrooms every day, I'll be using mushrooms. Like
after 10 hours of tripping, the last thing you want to do is trip again.
Right.
And
whereas other drugs, there is more of a hook in to like, okay, take this more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's partially just to do with like the length of it. Like if you just trip for like 15 minutes,
and you cannot sleep. Usually, most people cannot sleep.
They say DMT is good because you trip for literally like 15 minutes and then you're done.
I heard that's really intense though.
Yeah, I've heard it's really intense, and I've also heard it does not feel like 15 minutes.
Same thing with salvia. Salvia divinorum.
Yeah, I've never done salvia. But isn't that legal? I think that's legal, right?
It used to be. I don't think it is in most
some
states anymore.
I used to live in New Mexico, and it's legal there still, but here in Ohio, where we live now, it's illegal. But it was legal at one point. You know, when I was in high school, we used to get that stuff all the time. That lasts for like 5 minutes, and that is like if LSD was that strong, I would never have done it a second time.
Oh, really? So salvia was that strong?
It's very intense, and it only lasts like 5 minutes. If you just take a little bit, like a beginner's dosage of LSD, it should be a very calming experience. It should not be an intense, like, took a hit off a crack pipe kind of, you know,
There was a great
intense.
article. There's a great article I read a few months ago, or actually probably about a year ago now. It said, I forget how many, like 10 or 15 geniuses and their drugs of choice. And like it's a
Signature service, baby.
At Jiffy Lube, we want you to have it all. Expertise and convenience.
how many, like 10 or 15 geniuses and their drugs of choice. And like it's a who's who of brilliant people that we're all doing something. And I think that's a powerful argument right there for, like, don't buy into the propaganda, the reefer madness bullshit of like, ooh, just say no. It's like, actually, no. Sometimes you say yes, and it works out for the better.
Yeah, I would say so. And I'm sure a lot of those, I'm wondering, actually I shouldn't say I'm sure, I'm wondering how many of those people in that list, you know, were either teenagers or in their 20s during the 60s at that point.
Actually, a bunch of them probably.
Yeah.
What's it? Well, Carl Sagan was one. He smoked a lot of weed. There were some business people. There was a neuroscientist. I forget the neuroscientist's name. The one that always stuck out in my mind was Freud. He's older, but he supposedly did cocaine all the time.
Yeah. From what I understand, he may have even have given it as a treatment at some point.
Yeah. No, that was commonplace. Did you know the first drug ban was in 1914 in America? Before then, everything was legal.
Yeah, I've seen photos of Bayer heroin pills.
Yeah, man. People used to give heroin to kids, like tiny doses, like one, spoon of like opium or whatever it was, to kids so that they'd fall asleep. Because it helps you fall asleep. Yeah, it's awesome. It's like at night. And by the way, another side note here, this isn't really as related, but it also used to be the case that nannies used to jerk off the kids.
Oh.
They were like, yeah, but when they put them to bed, so think about it. Living back then, if you were growing up back then, before you go to sleep, you're like this, 14-year-old or whatever. You get jerked off by the nanny and you get a spoon of opium before you go to sleep. I want to go back then, man. That's awesome. That's a great life.
Life was good.
That is like the utopia that we were all looking for.
Jerk me off and give me drugs.
Yeah. All right.
How do we get away from that? I don't. I mean,
so we'll move on. Yeah, I mean, if that's the America we're trying to get back to, then I'm a conservative.
Yeah,
now.
me too.
Yeah.
We build a bridge to the past. Bob Dole was right.
So we've got about 30 minutes left. We're probably just going to do videos. We'll do Q&A and stupid ads coming up next week. By the way, if everyone's enjoyed the video so far, feel free to hit the thumbs
up.
Thumbs up on the video. All right, so this next story is Texas judge blocks Obama's immigration action.
Finally.
We awake this morning to a big court decision in Texas. The president, remember, late last year used his executive power to change immigration laws, or at least change immigration policy. He can't change the law. A federal judge in Texas, a district court judge in Texas, said, no, Mr. President, you can't do that. You can't stop deporting people. You can't decide who gets to stay. This is something Republicans wanted. 26 states, I believe, led by the Republican governor of Texas, sued here. The White House will appeal now to the court in New Orleans, the Court of Appeals. Here's what they said this morning. The Department of Justice, legal scholars, immigration experts, and the district court in Washington, D.C. have determined that the president's actions are well within his legal authority. And here's where they say, we think you're wrong, sir. The district court's decision wrongly prevents these lawful common sense policies from taking effect, and the Department of Justice has indicated it will appeal that decision.
So, is it too late to give Texas back?
So on this issue, I find it hilarious because basically anybody who's opposing this immigration action on the right, what they're saying is, fuck you, Ronald Reagan. Because President Obama copied the Republicans for this, and I think it was a brilliant political move because he knew that he would be able to get away with it, and if anybody attacked him, they would be hypocrites. So he went back and he looked at what George H.W. Bush did and what Ronald Reagan did, and he just copied it. And it was a brilliant move. I mean, so back when Reagan did it and H.W. Bush did it, they did amnesty, which is actually a little bit further than Obama. He did like this temporary work status. And as a percentage of the population, so Obama's thing affects 4.9 million out of the 11 million immigrants. And they did it was a little over 1 million, which is what they're applied to. And if you look at it, apples to apples, they're actually both acting on the same percentage of the immigrant population. So again, he just took what they did and brought it today. And so anybody who attacks him for it, this judge is an idiot. He didn't learn his history. He didn't read about what Reagan did, so he makes himself look like an idiot. And also, it doesn't apply to criminals, and he did it so that it's perfectly constitutional and perfectly within his authority to do it as an executive order. I mean, obviously he was going to do that because he knows that the Republicans go after him when he fucking sneezes. So obviously he was going to be careful as to how he crafted it, and he was, and these morons still go after him.
You know, I mean, it kind of reminds me, too, of the situation where, you know, Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, whatever you want to call it. You know, I mean, basically it was a brainchild of the Heritage Foundation. It was supposed to be the
Romney Care 2.0.
Right. It was supposed to be the conservative solution to the conservative alternative to universal health care.
That's right. And Nixon
but then
was the first one, by the way. Nixon.
Yeah, but then all of a sudden
first, then the Heritage Foundation.
Yeah, well, I mean, the point is it had its genesis among conservatives, but, you know, 100%. Then once Obama embraced it, like, oh my God, it's the worst socialism we've ever seen. This is so undemocratic, and this is, you know, this isn't American, blah, blah, blah. And they're just doing the same thing with the amnesty issue, you know. No, they're not going to pay any. They're not going to pay any attention to historical precedent. They're not going to look at, you know, has anything ever been done like this before? They're not going to look at the legal precedent or, you know, anything else like that. They're just going to say Obama's doing it, so it must be the most evil, heinous thing that anyone's ever tried to do, and we need to stop it.
Your example proves that these people are they're not policy wonks. They don't care about the policy. This is about partisan politics, and fuck them, and we're great. To the point where when he brings up their policies, you'd think they'd be celebrating, but of course not. They're attacking him. Now all of a sudden they hate their own policies.
It's so weird because there were so many things that Ronald Reagan did during his presidency that would, by today's terms, be considered more liberal positions, but they they're so afraid to backpedal on anything that they won't, like, choose a new messiah of, you know, modern conservatism. They stick with Ronald Reagan and just ignore all of the things that he did.
Well, who else have they had that they could possibly even put in that position? You know,
Abraham Lincoln. They try to claim Lincoln even and forget about the fact that the Republicans were the more liberal party at the time.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a very different America and a very different Republicans and Democrats at that time.
Reagan just represents an idea to them. With Reagan, it's obviously not about policy. With Reagan, it's just about, you know, tall, strapping white man who was an actor with a nice smile who can give a speech and he's folksy and Morning in America with Ronald Reagan, and it reminds them of the 1950s, and it's like, oh, the good old days when the blacks knew their place and, all that stuff. So it's never about policy with them, man. I mean, if you were to go up to a Republican and say, hey, man, just name me 3 Ronald Reagan policies right now, I don't think they could do it. I honestly don't think they could do it. I think the majority of Republicans would be like, I have no idea.
I'm pretty sure that Ronald Reagan was a Democrat at the beginning of his political career. I'd have to look that up. Yeah,
he was pro-union. He was a big-time union guy. I think he was the head of a union.
Screen Actors Guild?
Possibly, yeah.
I think so. I think he may have been. I'm not sure. I know he was a union guy. You're right. I don't know. Yeah, we'll run this video a little more here.
So a victory this morning for conservatives. The question is, will a higher court uphold it?
Exactly. And we should point out that this obviously isn't a final ruling. What this does in the short term is delay the start of the application process, which was supposed to begin today. So if you or someone was supposed to
I mean, like, I'm not super... I don't really understand how, like, the court system works completely in relation. But I mean, it just seems very strange to me that some Texas judge can just say, oh, well, the president of the United States, his plan can't be implemented yet because I found some problem with it. Higher courts have already ruled otherwise. I don't see why some judge in Texas even has the ability to do this.
Yeah,
and like I said, I'm ignorant of how exactly this part of the machinery works. But it seems strange to me that should be the case. I mean, it will, but why should this guy even have the power to delay the president's order, especially when higher courts than his have already ruled that this is constitutional?
Well, the higher courts did they rule on this one specifically, or did the higher courts rule on?
Well, I don't know. That's the thing. I mean, but I mean, like, it's just very strange. Like, why does this guy in Texas have the power to do this?
Yeah, I mean, he's a federal judge. Like, I'm not against. I don't think I'm as against it as you are. The idea in principle, because the idea in principle is checks and balances, and you make sure that you don't have a unitary executive who becomes a fucking fascist dictator. I understand the idea in principle, and I like the idea in principle. The problem is that oftentimes when the Democrats are in power, you have the opposition party. They're not interested in any way, shape, or form with stopping legitimate overreaches of power. They'll just stop anything for any reason. So I actually like here's a good example, like Tom Hartman, who's a progressive radio show host. I love the guy. He's actually one of the reasons why I even got into this. But he always does these segments on his show where he talks about how the Supreme Court shouldn't even have the ability to rule on stuff that comes out of Congress or stuff that the president signs or whatever. And like he just disagrees with the idea of judicial review. And like I disagree with him. Like, obviously I understand why he's upset, because he sees the Supreme Court making horrible decisions. Like, I get it, but I don't think that means you throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that means that you just try to get good people to do the judicial review, because I think the idea of checks and balances is
right. I'm not against any sort of judicial review, but what I'm against is the ability of one federal judge to halt something that we already know how this is probably going to turn out, 99% chance.
Yeah.
And why can he just say, on this issue, I'm going to challenge the authority of the president to the point where we actually have to stop doing this.
Yeah,
we have to put this on pause. Like, doesn't it? It almost seems to me like, if he wants to bring this challenge, it kind of seems to me like the rule should be, unless there's other people that are going to make this same challenge, or there's going to be some coalition or something of legal experts who all agree on this point, and they're really going to have this battle. I think it should proceed.
Yeah, I wish I knew more about it. Like, I wish I knew how this guy made that decision and what case was in front of him. Because I don't.
Yeah, I mean, like, I kind of just wish I understood a little bit more about this process, but it just seems very strange to me that this one man would have the ability to say, no, we're putting this federal national plan on pause because I have to rule on, this one little issue or something. And it just seems strange to me. But
there's no doubt the guy's an idiot. There's no doubt about that. He has no idea that Reagan did the same thing, and he's clueless.
Yeah. So there's a precedent here. It's not just Reagan, but
yeah,
Bush Senior as well. Yeah.
Senior, correct. Yeah.
All right. So I think we'll move on. I'm gonna play. Let's see. I'm going to play one more video, and then we actually have 2 questions directed to Kyle from the audience that we'll play.
Sure.
Also.
7 inches.
7 inches what? We don't know what you're talking about, man.
Size of my pinky finger, bro.
Oh.
It's a long pinky.
So
that actually would be a very long pinky.
I saw this story on the news earlier. And usually when I see something on the news, it doesn't really affect me either way because it's the news. But when I saw this today, it kind of pissed me off because I'm a big fan of ancient history and stuff like that. And this is a video of people from ISIS destroying museums in Iraq.
Fuck knowledge.
Which is where some of the earliest human civilizations came from. So.
Yeah.
ISIS says God
Get rid of that
ordered
shit.
these ancient artifacts destroyed in Mosul, Iraq. One priceless statue after another smashed. Some date back to 700 BC.
700
what?
BC.
You know,
Fucking sexually repressed little fuckheads. Like,
no,
they're just
look, hey,
stupid.
guys, God told them to.
Oh, yeah.
All right, look, God created the
universe.
God created the universe. He understands everything better than us mere humans do. So to us, this might look like, wow, they're destroying, priceless artifacts from history. But what's really happening is they're just fulfilling God's will. So.
By the way, a side note real quick. This is, I know it's a tired analogy that's been made 1 trillion times over, but it is true that the Nazis did this too. They wanted to destroy, like, all the book, and Stalin too, like, communist regimes, fascist regimes, they want to burn books and, like, destroy history because they want to rewrite it purely in their own ideology.
Fahrenheit 451,
Yeah.
It's just that. It's that same scenario of, like, we'll control ideas, we'll tell you what the past is, we'll destroy all evidence to the contrary. Anything that we feel could be subversive or anything like that, it's all going away.
In northeastern Syria, these Assyrian Christians are fortunate to escape. More than 260 other Christians, double the original estimate, now held hostage by ISIS after fighters swept through their villages, according to an activist network. Women, children, and the elderly among them.
At 4 in the morning, they attacked them.
California residents Charla and Ramel David got a terrifying message about some of their 12 family members.
What we've heard is it was like a sea of black uniforms marching through all the villages, burning down the churches, desecrating the crosses, and...
You know what's so funny on a side note is while I was going through videos to play on the show tonight, I found a Fox News story complaining about how the mainstream media doesn't cover persecution of Christians by ISIS. It's kind of hilarious. Yeah.
Wreaking havoc.
The coalition conducted airstrikes in the region to back up Peshmerga fighters.
Peshmerga.
But there is great worry the Christians are in peril.
When you have a group this big, now that's assuming that they're all still together. We don't know that. They could be split up. But we're always going to be mindful of civilians in any kind of airstrike that we take.
Just across the border in Iraq, airstrikes continued. U.S., French, and Jordanian jets hitting an ISIS training camp near Al-Qaim, the first combat operation inside Iraq for Jordan. The Iraqi Air Force claiming this airstrike targeted an ISIS hideout in the same town.
But don't worry, guys. I'm sure the rise of ISIS had nothing to do with the United States, like destabilizing that region through like a decades-long war.
As Bill Maher said last week, Saddam Hussein is looking great right about now. Look, there's no doubt. There's no doubt that the dude was a brutal, vicious dictator. It's also true, without question, that he stabilized the region. Look, I don't think Iraq should have ever been created in the first place, because Iraq is 3 separate countries jammed into one. One area for the Sunnis, one area for the Shiites, one area for the Kurds. And it was created, I think, in the 1930s by Britain. So it's not a real... country. But once you made it a country and already made the original sin, from then on, if there's somebody who rises to power who's a strong man and they can keep all that shit in control, for fuck's sake, you don't know what you're doing. Don't, take out that guy, and then you have fucking ruling factions of a sectarian war, Sunnis versus Shias, and then the Kurds get involved. And the problem is we went in there and de-Baathified the government. That's Saddam Hussein's secular party, and then they're secular Sunnis essentially. And then once we de-Baathified the government and put the Shiites in power and made Maliki the head of Iraq, he brutally repressed the Sunnis, and then the Baathists ended up teaming up with ISIS. And by the way, we left weapons behind in Iraq when we got out of there that ISIS ended up picking those up and using them.
Yeah,
So
I saw the video of that.
We gave them the weapons, and we gave them the angry Baathists who made them strong. So if we never went in there, they couldn't have existed. They would never be as powerful as they are. But also, by the way, with that being said, because I want to be clear about this, that doesn't mean, therefore, that there's no such thing as Muslim fundamentalism and Muslim terrorism separate of that. I always have to add that caveat, because oftentimes people hear me make the points I just made and they go, oh, blame America first. You're just a liberal apologist or whatever. But it's not about, it's about both things are true.
I don't understand these people who can't grab. I don't understand these people who think that there has to be a single cause for everything.
Yeah.
It's there
Dude,
could
you'd be surprised, man. I get it from both sides. I get the progressives get mad at me for bringing up that sometimes there's purely ideological terrorism. See Charlie Hebdo. Purely ideological. There's no blame the West in that at all. That's all ideological. And then the atheists get mad at me for bringing up what I just brought up about Iraq, that ISIS couldn't be ISIS if it wasn't for us fucking up Iraq.
I find myself in that same boat, honestly. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's hard for people to get that. People don't. It's hard for them. They struggle with that idea that sometimes it's purely ideology, sometimes it's social circumstances, economic circumstances, and political circumstances, and actually most of the time it's a mix of both.
I would say it's more than a both, because it's a number of factors. It's not because look, it also has to do with just their personality, their upbringing. What kind of how do they look at the world? How do they problem solve? There's so many different things that go into someone becoming radicalized, quote unquote. And I would also and I hate these people who try to be like, oh well, it's just about this or it's just about that, and especially when I think I get more frustrated by the liberals who try to say, oh well, Islam is blameless. Especially when you actually look at the opinions held by so many mainstream Muslims.
Yeah. I don't like it when there are a lot of liberals who disregard good polling data because they think it's politically incorrect to make the point that, hey man, this number is a problem, right? How many people think you should be killed for leaving the religion and all that stuff. Whether or not they would act on it is irrelevant, really, because what that means is if somebody else did it, they'd be like, whatever, rock and roll, whatever the number is for the percentage that want to kill somebody for leaving their religion. So it's don't disregard the polls, man. You can make your nuanced point without having to disregard that argument. You know what I mean?
Whenever you have to cover your eyes and say "see no evil," you're making a mistake. Keep your eyes open and fucking actually look at all of the factors.
Exactly.
Don't try to just boil it down to one.
And let me give a few examples of this, because I've been doing this a lot recently, because I think this illustrates the point well. So look at the example of the Palestinian territories and Iran. In those two specific cases, I would argue that the radicalization was more based on external factors, because it just so happens that radicalization in the Palestinian territories coincided exactly with occupation. So it makes sense there to say, hey, occupation is a big issue. In Iran, for example, in the 1960s, there was an increase in radicalization. Why? Because in 1953, we went in there and overthrew the democratically elected leader, Mohammad Mossadegh, because he nationalized the oil industry, and he was going to make the people of Iran get the money for the oil. And the West didn't want that because we were stealing the oil at the time. So we overthrew that guy, put in a dictator the Shah and started stealing the oil again. So in those two examples, you can say, hey, the reason for the radicalization has more to do with economic circumstances, political circumstances, and stuff like that. But then there are other examples. So Saudi Arabia and Qatar. In Saudi Arabia, there's not the West's fault. Wahhabism existed way before the West started being imperialist. And Wahhabism is ultra-Orthodox, super conservative, fundamentalist Sunni Islam. And that existed before the U.S. was going around the world and fucking shit up. So the examples of Saudi Arabia and Qatar is a tiny oil-rich nation that does business with us. But meanwhile, they have jihadis who go and speak at their biggest mosque there. And they speak there on a regular basis. And they broadcast it on Qatar TV, the jihadis speaking. So that's an example. Qatar and Saudi Arabia are an example of not like the other factors being the bigger factors. That's an example of, no, it started with the ideology and it started with the text and the religion itself. So the overall point is the world is a complex place and it's a nuanced place. You have to look at each individual case for what it is. And sometimes it's a bunch of other factors. Sometimes it's just the text itself. And sometimes it's a mix of both.
I would say even with Iran and the Palestinian territories, though, I mean, you could look at these incursions of the West as being the impetus for why those problems happened. But if you think about it, I think people become more likely to cling to or turn to religion when they feel like they're being put under siege or something like that. It's
Absolutely.
It's like in the movie The Mist. I don't know if you've seen that or not, but these people are put in this very dire situation, and all of a sudden, these people it's an entire town of people. They're stuck in a store because there's monsters outside, basically, and there's the town crazy who's like this ultra religious right wing crazy fundamentalist bitch who 364 days a year thought of as crazy, but on the one day that something like this happens, everyone starts turning to her for guidance because, you seem to know what's going on. It is God judging us. What's really happening here? And they turn to that for leadership. So I think that, even if you can say, well, the West had a hand in that, I feel like the West just kind of drove people into the arms of radical Islam.
That is kind of what happened in Iran, because they threw in the puppet dictator, the Shah, and then he went crazy with his wealth and people started starving, and that kind of brought rise to Ayatollah Khomeini, who was not only their religious leader but also their political leader at the same time.
In those cases, I think you guys are both right. In those cases, religion was the vessel through which people were expressing their incredible outrage and anger at the current situation, politically, economically, and otherwise. And but I also do agree, I don't know if you were making this point or not, but I also do agree that it is true that, you are your last line of defense. You know what I mean? You can still stop yourself from radicalizing, religiously speaking, even if all the cards are set against you.
Sure.
But our point is that it pushes you in that direction for sure. The other factors certainly push you in that direction.
Yeah, I just think that, the Islamic faith, I think, is it's something that I guess I shouldn't say the entirety of the Islamic faith, because not every Muslim believes in Sharia law. Not every Muslim thinks that apostates should be put to death. But an uncomfortable amount of them do. And I feel like to say that religion has no component in something like ISIS. I think that you have to ignore you have to ignore the biography of Muhammad. You have to ignore what Sharia law actually says. You have to ignore the policies of so many Middle Eastern countries.
No, you're right. And this is why I disagree. This is why I keep trying to make my it's both things argument, because the liberals tend to make the argument of it's never the ideology, it's never the religion, it's never the text, it's always the other factors. So you can never say anything wrong about the religion itself and the text itself. And like I said, I think both things are a factor, and obviously the religion has a lot to do with it, and in some cases it's purely the religion itself which leads people to act in a certain way and set certain policies and stuff like that. So you're right. I think
we have
We have a few minutes left. I was just going to say, in many cases, it's desperation that turns people to religion, which changes it to, crazy fundamentalism at that point.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we need to move on. I think we have a couple of fan questions for Kyle.
We have 2 specific fan questions for Kyle, and that we'll have him answer both of those, and then we'll wrap it up here.
Sure.
All right.
Good evening, Drunken Peasants, and I really hope I have this in time for Kyle to see from SecularTalk TV. I just wanted to ask you how you guys feel about the massive lack of intellectual curiosity when it comes to the fact that 75% of all BuzzFeed users see a black and blue dress as white and yellow.
Did you see that thing?
Yes.
I was going to ask you guys about that, man, because literally everywhere today I see people talking about it, but I never went to the original article that led people to talk about it. Is it just a picture of a dress and people are arguing over the color?
Yeah, the color is very difficult to determine by looking at it.
Apparently, look, I see it, when I first look at it, I see a dress that is blue and black.
I see it with the yellow.
You see it with the gold and white?
But see, wait.
See, I can understand how people would see the gold though, because when I looked at the black sections long enough, I'm like, I can see that is kind of like a bronzish, goldish color. But I don't understand how anyone sees white though. No, it's one picture.
No, are you sure? Because I've seen multiple from different sources where people were talking about it. They've all shown the picture separately, and some of them there's a different tint on the picture. And others, they're different. So one of them, it looks purely blue and black, and the other, it looks yellow and white or whatever the colors were. I've seen them with different tints for sure, 100%.
I don't know. I've only seen one picture circulated and people arguing over what that picture showed.
Yeah, it's...
I don't know. All I can think is there must just be a subtle difference in the way that certain people are perceiving the visual information they're being given.
Yeah.
I don't even see how you could see white.
No.
Because to me, that it's clearly blue. I don't see how it looks like white at all.
One of the tweets I saw right before I came on air here with you guys is I forget who sent it out, but it was like why it was the title like why people are seeing two different things when they look at the same thing, and then there were 2 pictures that they put next to each other, cropped next to each other. One of them was clearly black and blue and black, I guess, and the other one was white and gold. And
I think they were probably just doing that for illustrative purposes or something, because
really?
I've only seen it with the one picture.
You're not American. Who do you work for now?
Purposes or something, because
really?
I've only seen it with the one picture, and I know people. There was I think it might have started as a Tumblr post because it was the picture of the dress, and then it was people.
Is it like this joke being played on us? Because it's like they made it one thing specifically, but then they argued that it's the other thing, and then they wanted to see how everybody would respond in a social experiment?
I have no idea, but Ben claims that he sees the white and gold, and I see the blue and black.
I didn't even know what was going on. I managed to avoid it all day, and then someone sent me the picture, and I didn't even know what it was, and they're like, what color is this dress? And I'm like, I don't know. And then they're like, well, some people see this, some people say that. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I can see the gold in it. So I don't know.
I'm convinced. And people who are listening right now, they probably already know. But I'm convinced that it's got to be some sort of a social experiment where they showed one thing and then they said, "Hey, do you see this white and gold dress?" But meanwhile, they showed a blue and black dress, and then everybody was arguing. You know what I mean? It's like, no, it's this, no, it's that, because they told me it was this. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
could be.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I'm just kind of speaking out of my ass here, but that's what
I kind of feel like it's probably just an optical illusion that some people's eyes fall for and other people's don't.
Maybe.
I think that's probably what's going on.
Well, I saw, just to be clear here, the original picture I saw, the one I saw originally, but
right.
like I said, I've seen a bunch of different tints, but the first one I saw was 100% blue and black.
I agree with that. Anyway,
let's play
on the same day, we find out that 400 men in India castrate themselves. Now, people like Jacqueline Glenn, they don't think that the dress is such a big issue at all. But here's the thing. If 75% of the world is wrong on a simple matter as the color of a dress, and we have 400 men chopping off their genitals for a fully intact millionaire guru in India.
Never heard of it.
I mean, what does that say about humanity?
I don't know.
So his question is, why do so many people care about the dress when they don't care about people cutting off their junk?
I don't know. Who
Oh
cares?
no! I think his question was, how fucked are we as humans with those two examples? One example of people getting the color dress wrong, and the other one where that was a story of an Indian guru who got people to chop off their dicks.
But there's so many better examples of why we're fucked than that. I mean,
Well, the chopping your dick and balls off because a dude tells
but only
you to. I mean,
only
that's-
four.
that's
I mean,
as bad as it
400
gets.
people did it. Only 400 people. That's a pretty small number if you really
Well,
think about
people.
it.
How many?
Anybody would do that ever is a huge problem. Somebody tells you to chop your dick and balls off, and they say I'm a spiritual guru with zero evidence, and you chop off your dick and balls
Think
because
about-
somebody told you. That's
think
a
about all
problem.
the-
That's authoritarianism.
Think about all the young men that get the tip of their dick cut off because a book said they should.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. Look, it's so weird to me that like there's still some arguments in scientific bodies that are in favor of circumcision, when my argument has always been, look at how it started. And then all like the arguments in favor of it came after they started doing it. It's not like they did studies, found out benefits, and then they implemented it. You know what I mean? It's like they started doing it for religious reasons, and then later on came the after-the-fact rationalizations. And by the way, to the argument that like, oh, it lowers STD rates. You know what else lowers STD rates? Totally chop off your dick and balls. Does that mean
Oh, it was you. It
I
was
think
you
he was
all
the
along.
guru. Oh shit!
All right, one more video.
Hey, Drunken Peasants. So, this question's for...
Oh, okay, yeah, go ahead.
Just to answer the other guy real quick. Yeah, a lot of people are stupid. That's my answer. He was like, hey, here are these stupid things. Yeah, dude, a lot of people are stupid. It sucks. We're trying our best to educate people. We hope other people will smarten up, but it's yet to be seen. But there are, look, that's not the only point I like to make. You know how, like, Bill Maher does it all the time. Like, people are stupid and that's it. Like, he always argues that, specifically about Americans. I think it's a little bit more complicated because, yeah, people are stupid, as evidenced by the things that guy referenced. But at the same time, if you actually look at polling data on political issues, the American people aren't masochists. Like, they're in favor of raising the minimum wage. They're in favor of ending all these stupid wars. They're in favor of keeping Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid exactly as it is and not fucking it up in terms of cutting it and fucking over people's benefits. Like, when you go political issue by political issue, the American people are actually fairly intelligent. So it's a matter of, I think there's a nuanced answer here. I call the American people politically schizophrenic, where I talk about how they're stupid on historical facts. They don't know historical facts. They're just ignorant about that shit. But in terms of their gut, visceral feeling, the majority of them are actually pretty smart in that respect.
All right, so now we'll move on to this one here.
Hey, Drunken Peasants. So, this question's for Kyle. So, what do you think of people who don't believe in God, they don't buy into any of the supernatural elements of any religion, but still consider themselves religious and still participate in the religious community that they grew up with? I knew a couple of people like this who consider themselves culturally religious and didn't really want to leave, and they had no problem with it, even though they didn't buy into it. So, on one hand, they're not really harming anybody, they don't buy into it anyway. But on the other hand, I'm thinking, they're still being exposed to these types of moral constructs, these types of toxic views of the world, and these types of people who kind of have messed up views. So, do you think that we should try to encourage them to step back and get a broader view of life and sort of, I guess, try to embrace their atheism? Or do you think that we should just kind of let them be? Thanks.
Okay, that's a great question, and I'll try to answer it as best I can. So, I always consider my people to be... Are you guys there? Did I lose you?
Yeah, we're here.
Yes, we're here.
I heard some weird background noise. Okay. My people, I consider, like, on my team, obviously atheists. I also consider agnostics to be on our team. And I also consider deists, so people who believe in God, but they don't believe in particular religions. And, like, the New Age spiritual people who like have pseudo metaphysical beliefs, but they'll admit to you, I don't know if there's a God and I'm not part of a religion, right? So that's the people who are like on our team. That's the general umbrella of secular, right? And obviously I agree more with certain people under that umbrella than other people, but that's by and large the people who are part of our team. And in terms of people who call themselves, like, they're culturally religious, like there are a lot of like atheist Jews, for example, like they're culturally Jewish, they're ethnically Jewish, but they don't like believe in their religion. Like, yeah, that's better. That's certainly better than being religious and believing in the religion. But I always, I don't know, I felt like I had an issue with people. Anytime you take that next step from this clan I just laid out here, deist, agnostic, atheist, or like new age spiritual person, anytime you actually label yourself as Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or whatever, I'm always like, really? Because the like open-minded ones and the liberal ones who just describe themselves as that, but they're not that, I always want to shake them and be like, but you don't fit the label, you don't fit the definition. Just take that next step. Take that next step and say, okay, I don't believe, or I'm an agnostic, or just that's where you really lie. That's where you belong. And I get it. It's hard because a lot of people, you know, they're from families that are religious and they know people that are religious and they don't want to feel like they're essentially ostracizing themselves by taking a step away from those people. But look, you could call yourself that, but you don't have to discuss it with the people who are religious and bring it up and like rub it in their face like, hey, I'm an atheist, I'm agnostic. Like, you don't need to do that. Just, you know, be honest with yourself with who you are. And by the way, just real quick, and then I want to get TJ's thoughts on this. I have what I call the 10% rule, which is I'm actually not part of the group that's like, I don't know, maybe probably Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris would be in this group. I love those guys, by the way, and I love their books too. But on this particular, there's one specific issue where I disagree with them slightly. I don't even think that getting rid of religion completely is a good thing. Like, I'm fine with just religion knowing its place, where like 10% of society, thereabouts, has their religion, because those are the people that kind of need that crutch to get by, and I wouldn't begrudge them that. But like, I think an ideal is when you have about 90% of the society that are non-religious and they express being non-religious, and you only have this small percentage that is religious, and those people are just religious as a last resort, and it's the crutch that they lean on. I'm not in favor, like, you know, just totally eliminate religion, even if it's by the proper means, which is like logical argument, as opposed to by force, which very few people, if any, are for that. But like, I want to argue it down to about a 10% number. I always talk about Scandinavia, man. That's my ideal. When you look at Scandinavia, they have social democracies, which are fantastic. They have the best political systems, good social safety nets, a perfect mix of capitalism and socialism. And they also, the populations, depending on which one you're talking about, but they're like 80%, 90% non-religious, the people are. That's my ideal. I don't need 0% to be religious. 10% will do. What do you guys think about that? TJ, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to return momentarily to her question, which she was basically asking, oh, well, these people who they don't actually buy into any of it, but they're just religious for, you know, the sense of community or whatever. I mean, like, the only reason that makes sense on any level is just because of the sheer size of the religion. If you actually think about that removed from the size of religion, it's a very strange prospect. It's like, I hang out with a bunch of communists, you know, even though I'm, you know, a right-wing Christian, but, you know, just because I like that community. You know, if you're part of a community, especially if it's a voluntary community, you know, you're part of that because you share a belief or you share a set of values. To say I lack the values or I lack the belief, but, you know, I'm still part of this community, it's almost like you're just lying to yourself. So yeah. I don't really understand that. I think, yeah, I agree with you. Take the next step. Get away from that. Find some other sense of purpose or meaning in your life. As far as, I do think the ideal amount of religious people is 0, but I don't think that's a practical number. I don't think that's a pragmatic number. I certainly wouldn't want to force people. I think that if people want to be religious, what I would be content with, it's not even so much about the percentage of people that are religious. It's really about the percentage of people that are secular.
Right.
Because you can actually be religious and still be secular. There's people who believe that, I'm a religious person, these are my personal beliefs, but when it comes to how society should be governed, that has no business because not everyone shares my beliefs.
I want 100% on that one, by the way. Just sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, sure. 100% secular.
100%
I don't really particularly care how much religious, although I think that I think people are better off not being religious. I think pretty much all people, even the people who are No, I think all. I would say even the people who, they need the crutch of religion, I think we can find them a better crutch. I think we can find them a more rational place to take solace. I don't think we need to tell them that, Santa Claus is going to bring them presents. I think that, I think most people are capable of being rational. Maybe people who have severe mental disabilities who are actually literally retarded. I'm not talking about the colloquial retarded. I'm talking about the real retarded, cognitive deficiencies, mental handicapped, whatever the fucking politically correct term is now. Maybe those people can still have religion. They can believe there's a magical man watching them and loves them and all that shit. But if you're not that, then you have no excuse, in my opinion. But I don't want to mandate that. I don't think that should be forced or anything like that.
Right.
So that's my basic impression. We got to wrap up the show. Kyle, why don't do you want to stay to do our little after show? It's about 5 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and wrap the show up. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed the show, please give us a thumbs up. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/DP. You already saw our Audible ad. You can see all of our social media links right over there. We also sell a t-shirt, Smoke Pan Every Day. The shirt has sold, it's selling well. Go ahead. You can go ahead and buy that at teespring.com/Drunken Peasants. We also have a
Drunken
hoodie
Peasants
available.
hoodie.
Oh, it's Drunken Peasants hoodie now?
Yeah, you can switch back and forth between the shirt or the hoodie. The link is in the description. Also, there's a link in the description.
Yeah, just go to the description link
to Kyle's channel as well.
Yeah. So if you like what you've seen from our friend Kyle here over from Secular Talk, you can go subscribe to him if you're not already.
All right, so we're going to end the stream now. Good night, everyone who's watching.